Chapter 114. Victory and Defeat Undecided. I bet 5,000 on Yi Ziwen's victory. A slim cyan figure appeared at the entrance. Yi Feng and others turned to look, and an expression of joy suddenly appeared on their faces. Little brother! Little brother! Brother Yi! Brother Yi! Many new disciples exclaimed with bright looks on their faces. Is that Yi Shiwen too audacious? Indeed. Although Emohan is not the strongest inner disciple, but Yi Shiwen is just a new disciple. You are right. And these newcomers need to see this battle and learn that it will take them several years before they start treating us as equals. Some of the sour senior disciples were discussing and looking down on the new disciples. In any place, there were talented people and mediocre people, and the talented people would speak with their strengths, while the mediocre speak on the basis of their seniority, because they just couldn't get used to seeing these new talented people coming to the main sect. These words were totally disregarded by the people, and Yi Shiwen did not care either. Although seniority was indeed important, but in this world, the strength was the supreme authority, and as long as there was enough strength, what was the use of seniority? Who would care? I bet 5,000 on my victory. Yi Shiwen walked to the front of the gambling disciple and said. After a moment, the disciple very calmly accepted 5,000 spirit stones, though this number was a big and scary figure, because even if it was a master at Xiantian 5th stage, he would have nothing left after betting such a big figure. Only some of the top seed disciples could probably dare to bet such a huge amount of spirit stones like Yi Shiwen, because once lost, they might lose everything. However, if won, then they could easily make 10 times of the bet amount. Then their acquired wealth would be comparable to that of many of the core disciples. After the registration, Yi Shiwen directly turned around, and there was no sign of anxiousness on his face, as if he had already won the battle. After that, the gambling house closed down and stopped registering any more bets. Although the amount of 50,000 spirit stones was an astronomical figure for inner disciples, and even for some core disciples, but when it came to true disciples, this amount was nothing for them. Little brother, you seem to be very confident today, Yi Feng asked. Relax. Yi Shiwen smiled and said. Today, I am going to finish this battle in a moment. The surrounding of the life and death arena was packed with disciples, and it could be described as a sea of people. And not just inner disciples. Even a lot of core disciples had come as well to watch this battle. Minute by minute, second by second, time was slowly approaching the initially set time for the battle. Many of the disciples surrounding the life and death arena began to shout and cheer for the contenders, especially the members of Fudi faction, who were cheering for their faction's deputy main, Emohan. Deputy main, kill that arrogant bastard. Let those newcomers know our fierceness. The disciples of the Fudi faction were laughing, while the new disciples of the Qianyu faction were glaring at those senior disciples, and were extremely angry. On a distant grandstand, opposite the ring, two figures were standing on top of it, and were looking indifferently towards the life and death arena. If Yi Shiwen was present there, he would be surprised to discover that one of the figures was actually the guy who had come to help him last month, Jing Yannan. And at his side stood a black-robed youth, who had a pale face but looked very handsome, and right now, he was staring towards the arena. Brother Jing, I don't think that Yi Shiwen will dare to come. The battle's going to start any time, but I can't even see even a trace of him anywhere. The black-robed handsome said. Impossible. Jing Yannan shook his head and said, although I have only met him once, but in the end, you need to acknowledge the fact that Sister Hua has a favorable impression of him, and I noticed that his frame of mind is extremely tough, and he possesses a very strong willpower. He will die standing rather than kneeling in front of someone, so it's absolutely impossible to think that he is some timid guy who would run away from a fight. Oh, it's rare for an inner disciple to obtain such high appraisal from Brother Jing. The black-robed handsome youth said in a surprised manner. He just thought that Jing Yannan had come to mediate, because Hua Menghan had asked him to do so, but he never expected that Jing Yannan would have such a high evaluation of Yi Shiwen. Jing Yannan lightly smiled and said, well, that's because he is a genius among this year's new disciples. Genius, haha. How many geniuses do you think come and die every year in the Yiyuan school? What's the use of being a genius if he doesn't get a chance to grow? The black-robed youth shook his head and said with a smile on his face. Almost all the disciples who came to join the main sect from various subschools were all considered geniuses in their respective subschools. Back then, they were called the top disciples and were also the well-known disciples. But after joining the main sect and getting grouped with several geniuses coming from across the state, their original fame and title of the genius seemed quite ridiculous. Talented geniuses. These titles were useless if they didn't get a chance to grow and display their real talent and potential. People only remembered the glory of those who were still alive. No one would remember how many bones of the dead geniuses were used in paving the road to fame and glory. Emohan was also the strongest new disciple back then when he had joined the main sect. That is the reason why I allowed him to become my faction's deputy main, the black-robed handsome youth said while resting his body against a stone pillar. This black-robed handsome youth was actually the founder of Footy faction, Qin Mia's. It's going to be quite interesting. One is this year's strongest genius, and the other one is the strongest genius from 2 batches ago. Jing Yinan smiled and said, "What's so interesting about it? If this battle took place a few years later, then it will be difficult to guess who wins. But right now, the outcome of this battle has already been decided." Qin Mia's indifferently said, Hard to say. Do you know that a few talented new disciples have been awarded the Xian Jindan this year? Jing Yinan said, and the corners of his mouth slightly curled up. Xian Jindan. Qin Mia suddenly gawked for a moment. He obviously knew about Xian Jindan and its mysterious and profound effects. In fact, it was so precious that even in the main sect, only elite disciples could obtain such a precious item. But to him, it was useless because a Xian Jindan could only be used by the masters at Xiantian 5th stage or below, and he had crossed the Xiantian 5th stage a long time ago. They are willing to give it to the new disciple, but this is the Xian Jindan. Qin Mia said in a serious manner. Even if they have given a Xian Jindan to Yi Shiwen, but it will still not change the outcome of this battle. Qin Mia's had no words to say anymore. A lot of big personalities came to watch this battle and knew about the terms of this battle. He had made a big decision to allow this battle, and a lot of things depended on it. This was a big turning point as everyone knew that gratitude and grudges were part of life, and things had already become worse for senior and new disciples. But if Yi Shiwen was defeated in the battle, then they would be able to suppress the new factions without any interference, and new disciples would have to bitterly accept it without any resistance. He knew that this year's batch was filled with several genius disciples, and he would be able to obtain them as his faction's members. This battle was a great opportunity, and he could reap a lot of benefits for his faction, and this was the fundamental reason why he accepted the mediation of Jing Yinan. At this time, during their conversation, Footy faction's deputy main, this battle's other contender, Emohan finally appeared. Chapter 115. Xiantian Shao successfully achieved. Emohan was a tall warrior with grandiose stature, clad in brilliant clothing, stout, and there was grim look on his face. Where's Yi Shiwen? Why has he not appeared yet? Emohan asked in a cold voice. Maybe he is scared to come up in the arena. The members of the Footy faction said with ridicule. Ha 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 ha. The members of Footy faction burst out in a loud laughter. Why don't I find this joke funny? A calm and clear voice suddenly came from the crowd and interrupted the laughter of the members of Footy faction. Yi Shiwen slowly walked out of the crowd and looked indifferently at Emohan. You finally came. Good, you did not let me down. Emohan said in a callous tone, although he didn't care. But if he paid attention, he would have sensed that Yi Ziwen's body was exuding somewhat restless aura which was very intense. With Yi Shiwen in the arena, it seemed as if the atmosphere was instantly lit up, and the enthusiasm of everyone present on the scene also heated up. Deputy Main, teach that arrogant brat about the profoundness of this world. Deputy Main, come on. The members of the Footy faction clamored loudly and started cheering for Emohan. Emohan didn't speak anything, and without giving any time to Yi Shiwen to gain a foothold, his body instantly launched like an arrow towards Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was well prepared and didn't want to be outdone by him. He took a step and his figure disappeared, and went skimming towards Emohan, and his palm rumbled. In the arena, the two shadows of these contenders passed over gently and swiftly like lightning, like two meteors in general, and in a flash, they crashed into each other, and produced a loud collision along with a huge explosion. And right at that time, the two share of vigorous Xiantianjin Qi suddenly erupted, and under the fury of their fierce strengths, cracks instantly appeared even on the hard floor of the arena. Bang bang! A low and deep sound spread in the arena, and their shadows immediately retreated back. And in this round of battle, no one could understand who won, because it was like a clash between two equally powerful challengers, and no one actually won in this round of battle. In the eyes of both of the contenders, there was a color of surprise, especially Emohan. He was totally stunned because he did not expect that Yi Shiwen would be able to directly take on his attack, and even after the fierce collision between them, Yi Shiwen looked absolutely normal, as if it was not at all strenuous for him. In fact, he actually quite easily received Emohan's blow. Yi Shiwen was also surprised because he did not think that Emohan would be so strong, obviously stronger than what he anticipated. Emohan pulled out a pitch-black long spear from his storage ring. The spear point was flashing, and was surrounded with a cold and threatening aura, and like a viper came out of the hole. It instantly dashed towards Yi Shiwen, and immediately came in front of him. And just when it arrived right in front of him, it released several spear shadows at him. Yi Shiwen also instantly pulled out the long blade from the scabbard on his back, and the long blade started to dance in his hand, producing several blade shadows dancing in the arena, which then moved forward to welcome the incoming attack. Clang! The crisp sound of metal clashing resounded along with sparks from the collision between the two that spread throughout the arena. Yi Zaiwen's long blade fiercely collided with the spear of Emohan, and their enormous strengths could be felt by everyone present on the scene. The visible ripples of shock waves were continuously pouring out of the arena, and in a flash, the two figures exchanged several blows, which happened so fast that it was difficult for many spectators to track with their eyes. After exchanging many blows, they drew back several steps. Your strength is pretty good, but you are still too tender and amateur, Emohan said, and the spear in his hands shook slightly, as if a viper was preparing to bite at any time. The water in the main sect is very deep. It's not a place where a newcomer can just come and act unreasonably. What utter nonsense. Even if this place has deep water, I will still keep trying and temper myself to go deeper. Yi Shiwen indifferently said. If that's the case, then you can't blame me. Emohan shouted loudly, and his strength of peak Xiantian 5th stage completely broke out, and an aggressive aura came out of his body, and completely wrapped the entire arena. Yi Shiwen was also not going to be outdone, and the very next instant, an equally powerful and even slightly more intense aura completely erupted from his body and spread throughout the arena. In this month, it was impossible for Yi Shiwen to have not done anything. After taking a dose of Xian Jindan, in a short time, Yi Zaiwen's cultivation reached the peak of Xiantian 3rd stage, and he also transformed 100% of Houtianjin Qi present in his body into Xiantianjin Qi, which in turn greatly increased his battle efficiency. During this month at last, he finally consolidated Celestial Step, and fully grasped it to the Deshang realm. And finally, he also practiced Full Moon Beheader to the Deshang realm. Now he finally succeeded in reaching the Deshang realm of all the moves of Cold Moon Beheader. Yi Zaiwen's secret technique, the hardest to practice, his last trump card technique Coiling Dragon Palm, and its first move Hidden Dragon Rises from the Abyss was also practiced to the Deshang realm. In other words, now among all of the martial arts techniques that Yi Shiwen had practiced so far, only Tyrant Body Technique was practiced to the 2nd layer, and that too only to the Xiaoqing realm. Except this, he had already practiced all other techniques to the Deshang realm. After reaching the Xiaoqing realm of the 2nd layer of Tyrant Body Technique, at present, Yi Zaiwen's strength directly broke through the strength of 99 dragons, attainable only by the masters at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage, and reached the strength of 100 dragons. This was the strength attainable only by the masters who successfully achieved the Xiantian Shao state. However, By virtue of the mysterious effects of tyrant body technique, Yi Shiwen was able to achieve the Xiantian Shao state and obtain the strength of 100 dragons. Xiantian Shao state was the state right above the peak Xiantian 5th stage. When a warrior converted 100% of the Houtian Jin Qi present in his body into Xiantian Jin Qi, he reached the peak of Xiantian 5th stage. But some people could go even further. After reaching the peak of Xiantian 5th stage and transforming 100% Xiantian Jin Qi, the warrior would feel the Xiantian Jin Qi flowing in all parts of his body, and even a swing of arm would display the strength of 99 dragons. And after going a step further and achieving the strength of 100 dragons, although there was a difference of only 1 dragon's strength, but the overall display of strength would greatly change. Those at the Xiantian Shao state were a lot stronger than those at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage. So Yi Zaiwen's fighting strength was now stronger than ever, in its top condition, and now, he was fully able to easily compete with a master at the Xiantian Shao realm. And Mo Han was only at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage. In the arena, both long blade and spear were releasing bright rays of light in abundance. And suddenly, the next instant, the two experts dashed towards each other, and under the gazes of several spectators, it seemed as if a violent storm swept out of nowhere. And in a blink of an eye, the two figures violently clashed. Boom! Two dazzling figures severely collided with each other, causing a surge of terrifying air explosion from the tips of their weapons, and maliciously initiated a loud blast, which bloomed like a lotus flower in the arena, and the very next instant, the blast that had bloomed like a lotus instantly exploded and sent shock waves in all directions. Pung! A figure retreated several steps in the life and death arena, leaving deep footprints on the arena, and left wide cracks on the solid floor of arena. The blast dispersed, and everyone saw that the explosion pushed back a figure, and it continuously drew back several steps away. And to everyone's surprise, it turned out to be Mo Han. Everyone called out in alarm. This was simply impossible, because under the blast of this violent collision, the one who was pushed back was actually Mo Han, instead of Yi Shiwen. Above the stand, Qin Muse's eyes were stubbornly staring at Yi Shiwen, with a panic-stricken look on his face, and muttered, "How is this possible? Just how is this possible?" At his side, Jing Yannan was also incomparably astonished. Although a moment ago, he talked in favor of Yi Zaiwen's strength and potential, but he definitely did not expect that Yi Shiwen would actually be able to largely prevail over Mo Han, which left him totally dumbstruck. In the crowd surrounding the arena, the disciples of Fudi faction and Qianyu factions had unbelievable expressions on their faces. But, for disciples of Qianyu faction, it was more like an unquenchable pleasant surprise. Although they did not know how Yi Shiwen suddenly became so strong, but there was no doubt that he was the hope of their faction and would successfully protect the Qianyu faction. Chapter 116. Yi Shiwen wins. There was an awkward expression on Mo Han's face, as he firmly stood on the periphery of the arena, unable to hide the consternation on his face. His present state was the result of the collision between him and Yi Shiwen, and it turned out to have such an outcome, because just now, he finally came to understand the tyrannical strength of his opponent, and was going through the state of reality shock. "Brother Yi is really a monster," Zhang Yang said with an amazed look in his eyes. Yi Feng was also incredibly looking at his younger brother. His brother unbelievably displayed such an amazing progress, and completely left him behind. Originally, during this month, he was anxious, and came over to talk to Yi Shiwen many times regarding this battle. He was extremely worried and concerned about Yi Shiwen. After all, this situation of facing suppression from the senior disciples was not a new thing. This had happened many times in the past as well, and every time new disciples joined the main sect, there were always some proud and ambitious new disciples who would try to form their own banner. But each time, their efforts would be completely crushed by the senior factions. Although, it was said that a lot of genius new disciples joined the main sect, but it didn't make much difference because they were still weak compared to the senior disciples. But for the new disciples, this was a battle for their dignity. Yi Shiwen was fighting not just for saving the existence of Qianyu faction, but also to safeguard the dignity of the new disciples. And once he won, new disciples would be able to save their dignity, and those senior disciples would also have to accept that they must not look down on the new disciples. Like Yi Shiwen got a Xianjin Dan from the Tongtian Peak for performing well in the assessment exam, Yi Feng had also been rewarded with a Xianjin Dan, and for past 1 month, he tried his best to meet Yi Shiwen, and to give his own Xianjin Dan to Yi Shiwen, but couldn't meet him. Yi Shiwen was engaged in closed-door training, and had strictly said that no one would disturb him for this 1 month's time. Yi Feng knew that Yi Shiwen also had a Xianjin Dan, and if coupled with his own, he would have 2 Xianjin Dan. Then there was still hope that in a short time, he might be able to break into the Xiantian 5th stage. Although Xianjin Dan was very precious, but in his mind, how could it be more important than his precious little brother? But he did not expect that in such a short time, Yi Ziwen's battle strength would increase to such a terrifying extent. Although, originally, in his mind, Yi Shiwen had always been a strong existence, but he never knew the exact extent of his talent. Only now did he finally come to understand that by using just 1 Xianjin Dan, Yi Shiwen was able to surpass a master at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage. He had been unable to meet Yi Shiwen, and like everyone else, he was also totally bewildered. Yi Feng knew that this feat was absolutely not achievable for other disciples. After all, in order to break through to the peak of Xiantian 3rd stage, and also to master various martial arts techniques, a Xianjin Dan was not enough, and Yi Shiwen had to consume at least 2,000 spirit stones. And without the help of Xianjin Dan, he would have to spend 4,000 spirit stones. And even after that, there was no guarantee to attain such a feat. Even after endless consumption of spirit stones, he had to push himself to the absolute limit to gain his current terrifying strength. Emohan gradually approached Yi Shiwen, and his aura continued to increase dramatically. Clutching the spear in his hands and pointing its tip at Yi Shiwen, he was staring firmly at Yi Shiwen. Suddenly, in the arena, in the range of 10 steps around Emohan's body, a burst of strong Xiantianjin Qi rushed out from his body and flooded the arena. Emohan heavily trod on the floor of the arena, with the spear on the front, and it seemed as if his physique was taking shape of a spear, and on the spear tip, Xiantianjin Qi rapidly began to condense. Combined with his incredible aura flooding out from his body, and his spear stacked with the Xiantianjin Qi, it seemed like his body had almost fused together with his spear. A unified man-spear literally went piercing through the air, producing a chi-chi sound, and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. This was not just the incredible might of peak Xiantian 5th stage. This was actually the man-spear unification. After getting cornered by Yi Shiwen, Emohan felt pressurized, and due to that, he was able to reach a realm that only few people were able to reach, although only for a little while. But there was no doubt that it not only increased his combat strength, it was also going to become a great advantage for his practice. The man-spear unification. Once again, looking at this scene, the members of Fudi faction suddenly became excited and started cheering for their deputy main. And the new disciples of Qianyu faction were in inexplicable horror. Becoming one with the spear was a realm only a handful people could achieve, and after achieving this state, the strength attained was not a joke. There were those who practiced martial arts for a lifetime, but still couldn't achieve the realm of man-spear unification. For an expert to reach this realm, he would need to comprehend numerous levels of understanding about the weapon's martial arts technique, and inherent talent was also a must. Facing a terrifying opponent like Yi Shiwen, Emohan was unable to cope up with him, and was forced into a corner, and under such a pressurized state, he finally achieved the realm of unity with his spear, which shocked everyone who was watching this battle, especially the members of the Fudi faction. Good. Qin Miaz looked at Emohan, suddenly laughed loudly and said, I value worthy people. Man-spear unification. Among so many disciples in the Yiyuan school, not many could reach this state. Even if it was only for a brief moment, he would attain great strength. He never thought that a member of his own faction would be able to attain such a rare realm. Qin Miaz was extremely happy and suddenly laughed. Now, even if Emohan lost in the battle and his faction lost face, he wouldn't care because thanks to this battle, he could gain such a formidable deputy main for his faction. So in the end, this was not that big of a loss. Do not get too happy, Jing Yinan said to Qin Mias. Facing the fierce attack of Mo Han, Yi Xuan did not directly clash with him this time, because the strength of man-spear unification was enormous, and even if it was just for a moment, direct confrontation was unwise. So with a burst of Zhen Qi under his feet, his figure instantly and strangely disappeared from the spot he was standing. Mo Han's man-spear unification attack was aimed at Yi Xuan, but with a sudden loss of target, his complexion immediately changed, because the serious flaw of this man-spear unification attack was that it was necessary to clearly pinpoint the target, but right that instant, he just saw a faint trace of cyan-colored figure, and was instantly alarmed. An idea flashed like lightning in Mo Han's mind, and he suddenly turned 180 degrees along with his spear, and violently thrust his spear towards the blind spot behind him. Pierce! A crisp sound resounded and sparks scattered everywhere under the horrifying display of strength, and their 2 shares of fierce Xiantian Jin Qi started to continuously spread out. Mo Han had immediately turned back and thrust his spear at the long blade chopped out at his back, and at this time, the long blade contained a tyrannical strength, and it turned out to be so massive that the spear actually bent a little under its terrifying weight. Yi Zaiwen's figure finally appeared behind the long blade, and there was a faint smile on his face, because this man-spear unification attack was indeed very powerful. But in the end, the final victory depended on who successfully displayed his full strength. The sudden disappearance of Yi Xuan failed Mo Han's initial attack, and right now, he was almost caught off guard by Yi Xuan. Mo Han was incomparably scared because even after achieving the man-spear unification, he was still getting pressed down by Yi Xuan, and couldn't fully take hold of the battle, as he originally intended to. Without any hesitation, Yi Xuan immediately chopped out his long blade fiercely against Mo Han, which produced an extremely oppressive piercing sound, and encompassing the heavy and terrifying strength within itself. The long blade danced in his hand, and heavily clashed with the spear of Mo Han, and immediately deflected it to one side, and Mo Han was forcefully pushed away by the terrifying strength present in Yi Zaiwen's blade strike. And right this instant, Mo Han felt pressurized and couldn't maintain his man-spear unification state and came out of it. After coming out of man-spear unification realm, the outcome of this battle immediately became apparent to everyone. Mo Han was blasted all the way back, and Yi Xuan took advantage of this, and mercilessly swung the backside of his long blade at him. Bang! Mo Han was severely thrown back, and directly went flying out of the arena several meters away. Everyone was silent. Yi Xuan won. Chapter 117. Comparable to Seed Disciples, a silence spread on the scene, and many people had complicated feelings in their hearts. They never expected this outcome, but they just witnessed the display of Yi Zaiwen's incredible strength, which simply left them flabbergasted. A moment ago, Mo Han successfully achieved the man-spear unification and reignited their hopes of his comeback, but within a flash, he was so easily beaten by Yi Xuan that it was simply unacceptable. Even if his strength increased by leaps and bounds after entering into the realm of man-spear unification, he still couldn't change anything and thoroughly lost the battle. Qianyu faction was made up of only new disciples, and the past few months were the most difficult times for them. But now, at least no one would bully them anymore, which was the result of the terms of battle, and many powerful influences were witnessed to them. The new disciples of Qianyu faction, as well as other new disciples, were happily shouting in abundance. To them, this was simply a miracle. They won. They actually won. He actually won the battle against Mo Han. Mo Han's name was once on the list of the Seed Disciples. And even if now he is not in the ranking list of Seed Disciples, but he can still be considered a quasi-seed level disciple. But didn't you just see that during the battle, Mo Han entered into the realm of man-spear unification, but he was still blasted away by Yi Zaiwen's blade. These new disciples are really too tyrannical, and this Yi Xuan is almost comparable to those Seed Disciples. How can this new disciple be such an evildoer? He had just joined the main sect, and his strength is already comparable to that of those Seed Disciples. Almost all of the Seed Disciples are evildoers, and are masters of the Xiantian Shao realm. On a high platform a distant place from the arena, Qin Muse turned around, and did not continue to look towards the arena, and lightly said, "Well, this time I misjudged." However, right now there was a smile hanging on his face. He witnessed the amazing potential of Yi Shiwen, and he saw it with his own eyes. Who was Yi Shiwen? Just a new disciple who joined the main sect few months ago, and he easily defeated a master of peak Xiantian 5th stage. And looking at his incredible potential, it was not hard to guess that he would undoubtedly become a true disciple in the future. And if Fudi faction would have continued to irritate Yi Shiwen and his faction, then he might have settled scores with their faction in the future. So it was definitely a very wise choice to allow this battle. Now he was aware that he must not offend Yi Shiwen at any cost. Not to mention, due to this battle, his faction's deputy main unexpectedly obtained a formidable new strength of Man-Spear Unification Realm, which was definitely a major harvest for this faction. Now his faction's strength would increase considerably, and looking at this, one could say that he didn't particularly lose much, rather gained a lot. Yi Shiwen came out of the arena, and immediately, the happy-looking new disciples of Qianyu faction surrounded him, and started to exclaim loudly and chaotically. It was the time of celebration for them, and Yi Shiwen immediately became the center of their attention. "Brother Yi, this time we really want to thank you," Yan Qiliang said in a pleasantly surprised tone. He just never thought that Yi Shiwen would really be able to win. Now it was getting difficult for him to digest this fact, that Yi Shiwen won, and his Qianyu was safe now, and so was his position as its leader. Before Yi Shiwen could say something, Yi Rushua said in a somewhat proud manner, "That was naturally expected. Whose little brother you think he is?" Yi Shiwen didn't know whether to laugh or cry after hearing his sister's remark. Was she trying to praise him, or boasting about herself? Unlike these people, Yi Rushua was the only one who was least worried about Yi Shiwen, and had extraordinary confidence in him. "Let's go everyone and collect the spirit stones we just won." At this time, the disciples of Qianyu faction shouted together. While shouting and celebrating the victory of Yi Shiwen, everyone suddenly remembered that this time, they didn't just win their dignity and independence, but also a lot of spirit stones. An intense anger was suppressed inside them after continuously getting bullied by the senior disciples. But in a flash, it all disappeared thanks to Yi Shiwen, and in addition to that, they also earned back a lot of spirit stones. A compensation of 10 was placed on Yi Shiwen, and now that he won, everyone who bet in his favor won 10 times the amount of bet spirit stones. For these new disciples, this was not a small fortune. In fact, it was a large sum of money, and could be said that they became rich overnight, which made these disciples even happier. Of course, some disciples earned more compared to other, like Yi Feng and Yi Rushua, who bet a lot of spirit stones in favor of Yi Shiwen, and got 10 times in return. Suddenly, they became very rich, one of the wealthiest inner disciples. Of course, among these people, the one who earned the most was Yi Shiwen. He had bet 5,000 spirit stones in his favor, and now, all of a sudden, it increased tenfold, reaching 50,000 spirit stones. This amount was so huge that it could be said that for many disciples, this was equivalent to their lifetime accumulated wealth. Even for Yi Shiwen, this wealth was enough to help him practice to the Xiantian 5th stage, or above, and he would still not have to worry about spirit stones. No wonder, even those true disciples opened gambling houses to amass money, because this money-making speed was simply terrifying. Although Yi Shiwen earned a lot this time, but the one who made the most profit was actually the gambling disciple, because he kept all the spirit stones bet in favor of Mo Han, and a lot of people had bet huge amounts of spirit stones in his favor. Although the gambling house must pay 10 times compensation to Yi Shiwen, and others who bet in his favor, but only a few people had bet in favor of Yi Shiwen. So even after paying 10 times the spirit stones to them, the gambling house still earned a lot of spirit stones. If it was a core disciple, then with so much spirit stones, he would become filthy rich overnight. But behind these gambling houses were actually the true disciples. And although the earned amount was huge, but it was still nothing compared to the riches of a true disciple. All of the new disciples were happy and in a carefree mood. Since joining the main sect, they never got a chance to enjoy like this, and were also frequently bullied, especially those who were already in the Xiantian realm in their respective sub-schools, and were considered elite among the elites. But right after joining the main sect, they had to face suppression, and were also bullied and felt suffocated in this new environment. Now at last, they again felt proud and elated, and as long as Yi Shiwen was their leader, who would dare to underestimate this session's newcomers? Now many people were guessing that Yi Zaiwen's strength was comparable to that of the seed disciples, the top 100 inner disciples, among several thousand inner disciples. By getting counted in the top 100 inner disciples, one could imagine how tyrannical these seed's disciples actually were. These 100 seed disciples were super strong, and even if they were still the inner disciples of the main sect, their strength was tyrannical, and had even defeated some of the core disciples, displaying their enormous strength. If a strong expert like Yi Shiwen assumed command over the Qianyu faction, then its base would be rock solid, and at least, no one would come and bully them anymore. It was true that Qianyu faction was nothing more than one of the many factions in the main sect. And it was still nothing. It was a faction created by the new disciples, and led by a new disciple. But this battle was like a warning for many other factions, that if they tried to suppress Qianyu faction, then they would have to pass through an iron wall named Yi Shiwen, who held the potential to become a true disciple in the future. However, after seeing Yi Zaiwen's tyrannical strength, those senior disciples finally realized that he was not a chicken, but a lion, although still young, but already had fangs and claws, and if they were not careful then it could scratch and hurt them. Yi Shiwen already knew about the matter of seed disciples, and even it was true that his strength was now comparable to that of those seed disciples, but they were extremely strong and many had even beaten some of the core disciples. They simply stood at the pinnacle of inner disciples, and Yi Shiwen was still a new disciple. Yi Shiwen. When everyone was celebrating his victory, Emo Han's voice came from behind. Although I lost to you this time, but after 3 months, in the Seed Disciples tournament, I will defeat you and take revenge for today. Chapter 118. By Ma Jiao. Although I lost to you this time, but after 3 months in the Seed Disciple tournament, I will defeat you and take revenge for today. Emo Han looked at Yi Shiwen and said, there were only 100 seed inner disciples in the Yiyuan school, but it was not fixed. Almost every year, there would be a seed disciple tournament, and thousands of disciples would participate in this tournament to compete for the title of seed disciple. And not just because the title of a seed's disciple was pleasant to hear, but their treatment and welfare was far better than many of the core disciples. Emo Han's words clearly implied that Yi Shiwen had enough strength, that after 3 months, he would definitely be able to participate in the Seed Disciple tournament. But after reaching the realm of Man-Spear unification, he was now confident that after 3 months, his own strength would increase once again by leaps and bounds, and he would certainly enter into the realm of Xiantian Shao. And at that time, he would be stronger than Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen had also heard about the Seed Disciple tournament, because for inner disciples, to be able to become a seed disciple was a great achievement, and deep down in their hearts, all of them wanted to become seed disciples. Every year, during the Seed Disciple tournament, new participant would come to try their luck and achieve this glory of shining above the others. Yi Shiwen never thought that he would be able to participate in the Seed Disciple tournament in such a short period of time. Earlier, in his plans, he anticipated that he might be able to participate in Seed Disciple tournament in coming 5 years, but he never expected to have such a high-speed progress in strength. No wonder so many people came to practice in the main sect, where the advancement in cultivation was way faster compared to the sub-schools, to the point of inconceivable rate of progress. After saying those words, Emo Han did not wait for Yi Zaiwen's answer, and under the supporting arms of the disciples of Fudi faction, he immediately left. Seed Disciple tournament? Many disciples of Qianyu faction slightly gawked, and were totally surprised after hearing the words of Emo Han. It was by no means that they didn't know how big a tournament it actually was, but it was still a long way from them. Even for geniuses like Yi Feng and others, at least 5-6 years were needed to become strong enough to have any chance in the Seed Disciple tournament, As to them, even the span of 30 or 40 years was nothing in comparison to the lifespan of 200 years granted by the Xiantian realm. Little brother, you must participate in this seed disciple tournament. It would be awesome if you enter into the ranks of top 100 inner disciples, especially for the reputation of us new disciples. Yi Ruxia patted the shoulder of Yi Shiwen and said. At the same time, nearby, a somewhat depressed senior disciple was thinking that defeating Emo Han was not enough. Now he was planning to participate in the seed disciple tournament. In the last 100 years, a new disciple had never been so audacious. Yi Shiwen listened, smiled, but did not say anything, because at his current state, he would be able to participate in the seed disciple tournament, but he would have to struggle a bit while fighting the seed disciples, and even after that, he would not be able to come in the top ranks, only hanging in the end, although for the new disciples, it was still glorious enough, but for Yi Shiwen, it was only better than nothing. Everyone went to the establishment of the gambling disciple, who had just now made a great fortune thanks to the unexpected victory of Yi Shiwen. And with a refreshing look on his face, he paid 10 times the bet spirit stones to those who had bet in favor of Yi Shiwen. After betting 5,000 spirit stones and winning 50,000 spirit stones back, all of a sudden, Yi Shiwen became filthy rich overnight, and many senior disciples were looking enviously at him. Yi Shiwen didn't mind them, and quickly put all the 50,000 spirit stones into his storage ring. After receiving so many spirit stones, for a long time, Yi Shiwen would not have to worry about the consumption of the spirit stones. From the time he crossed through to this world, Yi Shiwen himself had to admit that his earning rate was very fast, but his spending speed of spirit stones was even faster, almost fast to the point of exaggeration from the point of view of an ordinary disciple. And even if it was a core disciple, they would also find this consumption rate nothing less than exaggeration. But the requirements of the special space were just too great to sate for Yi Shiwen. Even if Yi Shiwen must go all out on the road to desperately earn the spirit stones, he would still be able to practice faster than others after gaining the spirit stones. However, for other disciples, if they constantly move back and forth on the road to earning spirit stones, then they would certainly see a significant decline in their practice speed. In addition to that, their absorption rate of spirit stones was also very slow. Only Yi Shiwen could desperately earn spirit stones while maintaining a very fast practice speed. Moreover, for Yi Shiwen, the more the spirit stones, the faster his practice speed would be. So one could say that he was an exception who could display such a kind of unique way of rapid practice speed and strength growth. When Yi Shiwen, the representative of Qianyu faction, formed by the new disciples, defeated Emo Han, many enemy factions, who were originally against the Qianyu faction, publicly declared that they wouldn't cause any more troubles for Qianyu faction, and after that, Qianyu faction went on a path to rapid expansion, because in addition to the disciples of Tongtian Peak, all of a sudden, its reach extended towards the other 9 top peaks as well. The new disciples of this year's 7 high-ranked sub-schools joined the Qianyu faction. Moreover, more than 30% of state's major influences also joined the Qianyu faction. In a short time, the member count of Qianyu faction exceeded the mark of 1,000, and soon reached the mark of more than 2,000 disciples. Suddenly, Qianyu faction gained a prestige among the other faction, and this attracted the attention of a lot of disciples. The new disciples felt a natural sense of intimacy towards the Qianyu faction compared to other factions. Although they all knew that as far as development was concerned, the Qianyu faction was just an emerging faction, and was naturally not comparable to the senior factions. And the potential for their own development would also be restricted if they joined the Qianyu faction. If they could join the other factions, then they might have a better chance of growth. But these new disciples had been cultivated as geniuses in their respective sub-schools and other outside influential clans, and wanted to build their career themselves through hard work. In addition to that, Qianyu faction had Yi Shiwen, whose strength was comparable to those seed disciples, so it naturally attracted many people to come. Also, this year's top new disciples like Yan Qiliang, Yi Feng and Zhang Sun Yuan had also joined the Qianyu faction, and their reputations also worked towards attracting the attention of a lot of new disciples. However, so far, only new disciples had joined the Qianyu faction, while the senior disciples were still waiting and watching from the sidelines. When the disciples of Qianyu faction were excited at the sudden fame, development and expansion of Qianyu faction, suddenly, a rumor quickly spread throughout the Yiyuan school. After remaining dormant for 100 years, the followers of Bai Majiao finally appeared once again on a large scale in many parts of the Great Yu state. The news suddenly caused sudden uproar in the Yiyuan school. When Yi Shiwen heard this news, he got a feeling of storm clouds approaching. The matter about the Bai Majiao rapidly started to spread in the Yiyuan school, and stirred the new disciples. The senior disciples, who had spent almost 100 years in the main sect, began to explain things about the Bai Majiao to the new disciples. 100 years ago, Bai Majiao was a big organization of devil worshippers that had proliferated throughout the Wuxia. In Wuxia, the prestigious clans and sects didn't strictly discriminate between Xiedao and Modao. For example, Shuling sect, one of the 4 large sects of the Great Yu state, was considered as sect of Xiaomoedo, but was still ranked among one of the 4 large sects. Chapter 119, Young Marquis Shuling sect, one of the 4 large sects, was considered as the largest sect, where Xiedao was practiced by the disciples, and there were rumors that long time ago, in Wuxia, Modao didn't exist and humans practiced only Xiedao. According to legend, long time ago, the devil world had invaded Wuxia, and had caused havoc in this world. It was a great disaster, and although devil world's attack was repulsed, but during the long duration of this major cataclysm, Devil World had succeeded in sowing the seeds of Modao in Wuxia, giving birth to the existence of devil warriors. When the Devil World had invaded Wuxia, many human warriors had fallen prey to the magic of devil race, and had been confused, which degenerated their morality, causing them to become depraved warriors, and also started practicing the Modao and devil race's power techniques, which were also practiced by the Modaoists nowadays. In Wuxia, the disciples who practiced Xiedao were not considered depraved by the people, but the disciples who practiced Modao were not accepted by the society and Modaoists were not welcomed by most people. In fact, among all the sects who taught Modao to their disciples, Bai Majiao was the most notorious one. Bai Majiao, as the name suggested, was an organization whose sole motive was to spread the religion of worshipping the devil and advocating the devil world's rule in Wuxia. It was said that the Lord of Bai Majiao was actually dedicated to the sovereign king of Devil World, and there were also many legends about great devil lords, devil gods, etc. Bai Majiao's main objective was to use any means to open the doors of this world for the devil race to come in from the devil world, so it was no wonder that everyone was panicking by the sudden return of Bai Majiao. Hundreds of years ago, Bai Majiao had staged a rebellion in the Great Yu state, and many large forces had collaborated to suppress this rebellion. No one expected that just 100 years later, Bai Majiao would revive once again and started causing trouble. Regarding Bai Majiao, many disciples did not have favorable impression. After all, no one wanted to fight with the devil race. Then, several rumors and news spread throughout the Yiyuan school, and overnight, various matters related to Bai Majiao were dug out and came in front of everyone, including the case where many sub-school disciples had been attacked and disappeared on the way to the main sect. And now the news spread that it was also Bai Majiao's doing. And with the unexpected resurfacing of a notorious organization like Bai Majiao, Yiyuan school and other major powers would collaborate together to completely crush Bai Majiao. All sorts of Bai Majiao-related missions could be seen hanging in the Gongda Palace. Rewards were also very high. For beheading a Hotian-level Bai Majiao follower, one could get a reward of 1 spirit stone, and for beheading Xiantian-level Bai Majiao followers, one could receive 10 to 100 spirit stones as reward. However, for beheading a Xiantian 5th stage follower or above, the reward was quite high, in the range of 100 to 1,000 spirit stones. It could be said that with the sudden re-emergence of Bai Majiao, it was as if Yiyuan school was literally bleeding money to subjugate them before the situation got worse. For so many spirit stones as reward, Yi Shiwen was also very excited. because compared with his own ways of accumulation of spirit stones using various means, which were quite slow, it was rather convenient for him to behead the Bai Majiao followers and gain a lot of spirit stones as rewards. And not just that, his cultivation would also strive and increase in his fights with them. And the spirit stones received as rewards would eventually also accelerate his cultivation growth. So it could be described as achieving several results in one fell swoop. After making the decision, Yi Shiwen didn't hesitate any longer, and immediately went to the Gongda Palace of the main sect. No matter how many times he came to the Gongda Palace, he would still feel amazed looking at its grandiose, compared to the Gongda Palace of Qingfeng Mountain Subschool, which looked insignificant in comparison. Because of Bai Mojiao's matter, Yiyuan School's main sect had given out many missions, and they were currently being displayed in the Gongda Palace. Many disciples were frequently coming to pick up Bai Majiao-related missions. Yi Shiwen took a close look at these missions. There were missions about probing the hideouts of Bai Majiao in the Great Yu State, beheading the followers of Bai Majiao, who had already appeared, and started to rebel in certain regions. Each of these missions had different difficulty levels, and people were naturally choosing missions according to their own capabilities. Yiyuan School was unusually attaching great importance to this matter of comeback of Bai Majiao, because reportedly, hundreds of true disciples had already taken nearly half of the high-difficulty missions, and went to different regions of the Great Yu State to behead those devil worshippers. Yi Shiwen swept his eyes through the missions, and chose a suitable one, in which a master was required to trample the stronghold of Bai Majiao followers. He must start immediately because one person was allowed to take only one mission, and this time, due to the special matter of Bai Majiao, there was no time limit on the missions, and one could accept missions until the last Bai Majiao-related mission was successfully completed. He needed to act fast, and now itself otherwise any more delay would incur serious losses for him, as he might lose the chance to earn as many spirit stones as he could during this Bai Majiao uproar. He left the Gongda Palace and arrived halfway up the mountainside. "Are you the one named Yi Shiwen?" At this time, a somewhat contemptuous voice resounded from behind. Yi Shiwen turned to look. Not far away from him, 7 or 8 disciples were standing in a group, led by a dignified and imposing-looking youth. On his face, there was a sort of arrogance and disdain. However, Yi Shiwen was quite surprised to find that the disciples behind that arrogant youth were actually those 7 masters whom he had run into during the assessment examination. The so-called inevitable clash between the enemies. And even if originally there was nothing between the two sides, but now, it could be said that this enmity had become quite strong. "I am," Yi Shiwen indifferently said. Yi Shiwen glanced at them, and after reaching the Deshang realm of restraining breath technique, without putting any effort, he completely understood the breaths of these people. He instantly saw through their strengths, and according to his estimation, the youth who seemed to be leading this group had entered one step into the Xiantian Shao realm. And, even the strength of those 7 masters, who had intercepted him during the assessment examination, had shown great progress, and all of them had reached the peak of Xiantian 3rd stage. These sharp-eyed disciples, with their blade-like sharp gazes, were looking at Yi Shiwen, and it seemed as if their gazes would cut open a hole in his body. It was said some experts could use their gazes to kill people, and it was not a myth. There were a lot of masters whose gazes could congeal a piercing attack that could instantly kill a person. Yi Shiwen, standing in front of you is the young marquis. How dare you not kneel down to greet him? Among the 7 people, the diminutive youth coldly said to Yi Shiwen with a flash of hatred in his eyes. "What a joke. This is Yiyuan School, and you actually want to use power to fetter me. Whatever he is, he cannot make me kneel down in front of anyone." Yi Shiwen sneered and said. Yi Shiwen reckoned that there were a lot of children in the imperial family of Great Yu State, but most of them were not the direct descendants, and everyone was aware of the fact that there were many secret power techniques inherited only by the direct descendants. And this was the reason why these direct descendants must enter the imperial schools, to prevent these secret power techniques to go into the hands of the outsiders. So, only the children of branch clans would join other sects. So this title of young marquis was mostly self-proclaimed and nothing else. Moreover, Yiyuan school was also a big power on equal footing with the imperial clan of Great Yu State, so exploiting the secular powers to constrain a disciple of the Yiyuan school was even more of a joke. I heard that there is a particularly arrogant man among this year's new disciples claiming to be comparable to the seed disciples, but I did not think that you are even arrogant than the rumors. The young marquis said. Well, why don't you mind your own business? I don't care whether you are the young marquis or whatever. Trying to use your power and prestige in the Yiyuan school is really a joke. Yi Shiwen sneered and said in a disrespecting tone, as if he simply didn't care about the young marquis. You are courting death. The young marquis suddenly became furious, and with an extremely cold look in his eyes, he rushed towards Yi Shiwen. Chapter 120. Pseudo-spiritual tool. The young marquis' fist arrived directly in front of Yi Shiwen, and with just a look, one could say that it was an overbearing fist technique, and as his punch blasted, the zhenqi surged out of his body and flooded the surrounding area. With a burst of zhenqi under his feet, Yi Shiwen instantly launched the celestial step, and while displaying the might of celestial step technique, practiced to the Desheng realm, in a flash, he took several mysterious steps with his clothes floating all over in the wind, and he very smoothly and gracefully avoided the fist of young marquis. Then immediately, Yi Shiwen shot his palm, which instantly caused an explosion like the thunder and lightning, and the thunder-like zhenqi wrapped on the palms of Yi Shiwen instantly blasted vigorously. With a loud shout, he instantly shot rushing thunder hand, and it seemed like a group of thunder and lightning had directly impacted. How is this possible? There were expressions of disbelief on the faces of the seven masters. How can his strength increase to such an extent? When the seven masters saw this palm technique, suddenly, cold sweat started dripping down from their foreheads. If by chance, right now they were fighting Yi Shiwen, then right this very instant, facing his tyrannical palm attack, they would have instantly been exploded to bits. Although they knew that Yi Shiwen had defeated Emo Han in the battle, however earlier, during the assessment examination, Yi Shiwen had broken through right in front of them, and in their opinion, he was a strong expert. But it was impossible for them to digest the rumors about him having achieved the Xiantian Shao realm. However, just now, they witnessed his strength of Xiantian Shao realm, which completely blew their minds and threw their hearts into chaos. And young marquis simply never expected that Yi Shiwen's strength would actually be so formidable. He had always listened to the seven masters, and according to them, Yi Shiwen had a false reputation, but his strength was fiercer than those seven masters. But now, he finally realized how ridiculously wrong they all were to underestimate Yi Shiwen. The tyrannical strength of Yi Shiwen was far beyond the imagination of the young marquis, and he was certain that this kind of strength was impossible for inner disciples to attain, and only seed disciples could display such strength. However, at this time, he couldn't achieve anything by complaining, so he quickly folded his arms around his chest and instantly congealed an iron wall-like moon-shaped protection barrier, and prepared himself to receive the palm attack of Yi Shiwen arriving at his chest. For others, it was like an impregnable iron defense. Want to defend? Yi Shiwen sneered and sped up the rushing thunder hand by several times, and in an instant, it fiercely and accurately blasted into the chest of the young marquis. Yi Zaiwen's rushing thunder hand attack instantly pierced right through the young marquis's iron defense, and shot into his chest. Bang! Accompanied with a sudden and violent thunderclap sound, the body of young marquis was instantly blasted away, soared high in the sky, and severely fell on the ground. The young marquis' body severely hit the ground, his blood sprayed out, and he looked at Yi Shiwen, with an ominous color flashing in his eyes. Then suddenly from his body, a cold light flickered, and almost in a flash, a black light suddenly arrived in front of Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen was taken aback for an instant, and he immediately understood that this cold brightness was no trivial matter. He quickly raised his hand to block, and at the same time, he also chopped out a blade light. Bang! The blade light maliciously collided with that cold black light, and Yi Shiwen suddenly felt an enormous force emitting out from that cold light, which almost made him to lose grip on his long blade. That cold bright light fell on the ground, and when Yi Shiwen took a look at it, he saw that it was actually a double-edged flying sword, exuding a touch of spiritual pressure. And to be specific, it was actually a double-edged spiritual tool. But right now, this double-edged flying sword was full of cracks. A moment ago, this double-edged flying sword severely clashed with Yi Zaiwen's long blade, and with a loud rumbling sound, several cracks appeared on it. Yi Shiwen looked at his long blade, which was unexpectedly the same as before, glowing with a sharp and penetrating coldness, without a single crack on its surface, and was secretly amazed. In the cave of ironback silver apes, he had found this long blade from a pile of a lot of decayed and rusted weapons, because back then, he had taken a fancy to this long blade, but did not know the origins of this weapon. He never thought that it would actually be so terrible, that it would shatter a spiritual tool in one blow. These weapons were generally divided into ordinary weapons, magical weapons and spiritual tools, while the spiritual tools were divided into low-grade spiritual tools, high-grade spiritual tools and top-grade spiritual tools. Generally, the Hotian-level warriors used the so-called ordinary weapons. These weapons were made up of iron, and could easily be scrapped, requiring constant tinkering. Considering the ranking of weapons, right above ordinary weapons were the so-called magical weapons, generally used by the warriors at the peak of Hotian 9th stage, and above, as well as by the warriors at the Xiantian 5th stage and below. A lot of rare materials were required to create magical weapons like 100-years-old cold iron, and so on, and compared with ordinary weapons, magical weapons were a lot stronger and more rugged. Incomparably sharp, could cut even high-standard magical weapons. Yi Shiwen always thought his long blade was only a high-quality magical weapon, because none of the ordinary weapons had ever been able to put even a scratch on it, and with just a single strike, his long blade had scrapped several magical weapons before. But just now, his long blade actually scrapped a spiritual tool. There was no spiritual aura present in the long blade, like it generally was present in spiritual tools, implying that his long blade was not a spiritual tool. So Yi Shiwen assumed that it was a magical weapon. However, in the collision just now, it immediately chopped down and scrapped a double-edged flying sword spiritual tool. He could not say much about its sharpness, but he witnessed the extraordinary firmness of the long blade with his own eyes. That double-edged flying sword cracked by its own power of countershaking, showing the extraordinary toughness of Yi Zaiwen's long blade. However, a thought suddenly turned up in his mind. This young marquis had definitely not reached the Xiantian 6th stage, and still hadn't transformed Xiantian Zhenqi into Xiantian Zhenyuan. Then how it was possible for him to manipulate the spiritual tool? Spiritual tools could only be operated and manipulated by Xiantian 6th stage masters, and above. If someone wanted to manipulate a spiritual tool, then first of all, it was necessary to have Zhenyuan, and only Xiantian 6th stage warriors, and above could transform Xiantian Zhenqi into Zhenyuan. And using this Zhenyuan, they could operate spiritual tools. So in other words, this double-edged flying sword should not be a true spiritual tool, but the so-called pseudo-spiritual tool. A pseudo-spiritual tool was a weapon ranked just above the magical weapons, and just below true spiritual tools, and possessed a part of the spiritual characteristics. The power a pseudo-spiritual tool possessed was obviously far less than the true spiritual tools, but the advantage was that it was very easy to manipulate, and even warriors who had not yet reached the Xiantian 6th stage could use them. But even so, the pseudo-spiritual tools were absolutely valuable, and only 100 or 200 disciples, from among tens of thousands of disciples, probably had pseudo-spiritual tools. Only those top disciples kept pseudo-spiritual tools that were rich enough to buy them. Suddenly, the young marquis spurted out a mouthful of blood. Even if the spiritual tool was just a pseudo-spiritual tool, but there was still a trace of Yuan Shun attached to it. When Yi Shiwen scrapped the double-edged flying sword, he also thoroughly annihilated the spiritual link of Yuan Shun between the weapon and young marquis. And in addition to that, he had just received a palm attack from Yi Shiwen. So it was more like an injury over an injury. So he simply fainted altogether. Young marquis, the 7 masters suddenly called out in alarm. They never thought that young Marquis' pseudo-spiritual tool would not be able to hurt Yi Shiwen, And Yi Zaiwen's long blade would actually chop down and shatter a precious pseudo-spiritual tool in just one strike. Yi Shiwen stepped forward and while coldly staring at those 7 people, he said in a calm and cold voice, "Say last time, who directed you to deal with me?" Chapter 121. By Majiao Stronghold. Yi Shiwen stepped forward, and while coldly staring at those 7 people, he said in a calm and cold voice, "Say last time, who directed you to deal with me?" During the assessment exam itself, Yi Shiwen had naturally speculated who was the mastermind behind all this, but there was no opportunity to confirm his speculation. So this time, he must take advantage of this favorable situation to ask them and confirm his guess. "No one's directing us, what are you talking about?" The Chinese-robed man standing in the middle said obstinately, in an argumentative manner. "It's Hu Yonghang, right?" Yi Shiwen indifferently said and discovered subtle changes in the complexions of these 7 masters, along with somewhat consternation and astonishment, albeit fleeting. But it was enough for Yi Shiwen to confirm his speculation. "Well, you can choose not to answer, although I can't kill you here, but I can still crush all the bones in your bodies." Yi Shiwen sneered and said, because for these 7 people, he did not have a favorable impression, and he was not in a mood to show them mercy. After all, these 7 masters ganged up and tried to intercept him twice, and if it was an average person facing them, then he would have long been crippled by them. There was no fair play in 7 people ganging up on one guy. As soon as the 7 masters heard him, their complexions suddenly paled, because they could sense his resolute killing rage. Counting this time, they had already seen Yi Zaiwen's fierceness twice, and they were aware of the fact that if they were not on the Tongtian Peak, but somewhere outside the Yiyuan school, then they absolutely couldn't escape from the clutches of a killing god like Yi Shiwen. They never thought that they would be forced to repeatedly intercept him, when they were already aware of his ruthlessness. They knew that Yi Shiwen was definitely not a merciful guy, and on top of that, they had dared to intercept him twice. And because of this, they felt that Yi Shiwen might actually do what he just said. Yes, it was Brother Hu. At this time a disciple could not bear the intense pressure and killing intent released by Yi Shiwen, and finally confessed out loud. Immediately, the complexions of other disciples darkened, because they revealed the name of Hu Yonghang, an influential core disciple, and from now onwards, things were going to be tough for them in the Yiyuan school. Although Hu Yonghang might not care whether Yi Shiwen knew that he was the real mastermind planning things behind the scenes, but he was an eccentric man, and it was hard to predict his mood. By the time they would start following Hu Yonghang, forget the benefits they would get by being at his side. Perhaps he might torment them to death. Although they still hadn't followed Hu Yonghang for too long, but they were well aware of his cold disposition. However, at this time, Yi Shiwen had no desire to haggle over with them, so he just picked up the pseudo-spiritual tool from ground and turned around to leave. Although the body of this pseudo-spiritual tool was densely covered in cracks, but without a doubt, even if it couldn't be fixed, it was still a pseudo-spiritual tool, and could fetch him a price of at least 10,000 spirit stones. There were unsightly complexions on the faces of these 7 masters, as Yi Zaiwen's figure was moving farther away from them, but none of them actually dared to pursue him. After all, even young Marquis lost to him, so what could they possibly do? After walking for a while, under the foot of a mountain, Yi Shiwen whistled and a huge red-crowned crane immediately flew down from the sky. It was a well-trained crane, and after years of training, it would fully understand the instructions of Yi Shiwen through their interlinked minds. After he got on the crane, it flapped its wings and immediately flew out, drawing traces of lines in the sky. The wind was cold, fierce howling could be heard, and although sun was high in the sky, but chilled wind was intermittently blowing. It was an extremely strange atmosphere, and could make anyone to break into cold sweat. There was a desolate scene everywhere. The sandstorm was blowing, confusing the human eyes, and crows were cawing above the withered vines entangled on the trees. Yi Shiwen was walking on the trail as mentioned in the mission, and there was supposed to be a village not far away from there. But he couldn't see any vitality in the surrounding areas. Just dead air was present everywhere. According to information present in the mission he received from Yiyuan School, The Baimajiao stronghold was located not far away from that village, somewhere in this area where Yi Shiwen was currently taking a stroll. Although the followers of Baimajiao were actually human beings, but their acting style and conduct had slowly drifted closer towards the devil race. These followers practiced the power techniques based on Modeo, introduced in this world by the devil race long ago, and their ultimate goal was to break through the void and ascend to the devil world. The followers of Baimajiao were still humans in flesh and bones, but couldn't be regarded as humans anymore, rather should be regarded as devils. The area of their establishment, in basically a 500 kilometers radius, was generally desolate and uninhabited by humans, and finding them was also very simple because they would travel large distances in search of humans, and very few followers of Baimajiao hid their trails. Also, the followers of Baimajiao practiced cultivation methods that required human essence as practice materials, which in turn helped in increasing their cultivation by leaps and bounds. And after refining the human essence from the body, they would generally leave the remains which acted as a trail to find them. Yi Shiwen continued to walk inside, and in his heart, he was secretly wary and vigilant, because he could see the mummified remains of people lying on the roadside, and the black and red dried blood was present everywhere on the ground. Some scavenger birds could also be seen gnawing these corpses. Yi Shiwen could not help but held his breath. These followers of Baimajiao were simply too cruel and disgusting. He himself had also killed people before, but it was all because he had been provoked, and had no other choice but to kill or get killed. He never killed innocent people, and these corpses belonged to innocent villagers who didn't even have the strength to fight back, which was simply cruel. He was very annoyed to see how mutilated these corpses looked. Just from looking at the miserable state of these corpses, Yi Shiwen couldn't help but gasp at such a horrifying scene. When the carrion birds saw Yi Shiwen, a living human being, there was a sudden pitter-patter and they flew all over. These carrion birds had already absorbed a lot of yin qi from the corpses, and soon, the demon core inside their bodies would have a transformation into Devil Dan. However, even after transforming into a devil beast, they would still not be a match of Yi Shiwen. He started to mercilessly wave the long blade in his hand, and after seeing the miserable state of the corpses and carrion birds scavenging over them, in his mind, he was getting sick of this scenery. The Daoguang released from his blade towards the carrion birds. They screamed pitifully but couldn't escape, and all of them were split in half. Yi Shiwen observed the corpses and noticed as if someone used a claw power technique to grasp the bodies directly from the head, and then sucked out the soul, vitality, blood and qi from the living human bodies, which was extremely cruel and inhuman to do to someone. Yi Shiwen rushed through the area, while beheading the scavengers like jackals, carrion birds. Even the devil beasts that he encountered on the way weren't able to escape from the fury of his long blade. Jie, a human has come to die. Suddenly, Yi Shiwen heard a sharp and hoarse voice along with shriek laughter that came from behind him. And at that instant, a huge bloody claw also approached towards him from behind. Seeing that the huge bloody claw was coming to grasp him, Yi Shiwen immediately took a step and jumped into the sky, and the very next instant, he disappeared and directly appeared about 10 meters away, while at that place where he was standing just now, instantly, a skinny and bloody claw severely struck and created a big hole. Yi Shiwen looked and saw that the attacker had actually a strange appearance like a shadow, with his body completely covered up in black cloak. But from the cloak, 2 huge bloody devil claws were stretched out, and looked cold and gloomy, densely covered with blood capillaries, and looked extremely terrifying. "Boy, I didn't think that you would dodge my attack." That strange shadow laughed and said, "It seems that people of this village were slaughtered by you." Yi Shiwen looked coldly at that strange shadow and said, "Precisely, I turned those stupid mortals into practice materials by extracting their vitality. Of course, it's a lifetime blessing for them." That strange shadow replied in a loud voice. Chapter 122, Core Disciple. Precisely, I turned those stupid mortals into practice materials by extracting their vitality. Of course, it's a lifetime blessing for them. That strange shadow replied in a loud voice, Jie. I did not expect to find a practitioner of Wudao here. Haha. and it seems that you possess a very strong vitality, and even the nourishment I got by extracting the vitalities of 1,000 mortals is nothing comparable to the nourishment I will receive by extracting your vitality." That strange shadow said, while at this time, many sounds of strange laughter came from all around. "Ha ha ha! After absorbing his blood and essence, this old man can go one step further. Hurry up and kill him, I want to eat his heart and liver." Yi Shiwen saw several shadows clad in black cloaks coming out from all directions, and each of them was releasing strong killing intent. It was evident that they were waiting in the shadows to surround and ambush him. A deep sense of disgust flashed in the eyes of Yi Shiwen. He didn't feel so much disgust even for those true killers who enjoyed killing, but for these old devils, he instantly developed disgust, because these old devils didn't treat people as humans, but as livestock, on whom they fed on whenever they wanted to. They were a bunch of twisted and depraved monsters that had already lost their morality long ago. Sneaky freaks. Yi Shiwen sneered again and suddenly jumped forward, and right then, the earth cracked from the tremendous blasting strength in his foot, and shot his whole stature instantly flying out like a shell, while at the same time, he chopped out a huge bladiki. Bang! An old devil was instantly chopped in half. "Bastard, you dared to kill one of us, kill him, hurry up and kill him." The devils of Baimajiao started to roar again, and their devilish aura completely released and spread in the surrounding area, and a foul and disgusting smell also spread everywhere. Yi Shiwen sensed that all of these devils were actually the existences at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage. In addition to that, they had practiced a unique Modeo-based power technique, which made them so powerful that even the true masters of Xiantian Shao realm would find it very difficult to deal with them, and might die if encountered so many of devils at once. Yi Shiwen took a deep breath, then a bright and dazzling Daoguang instantly enveloped him inside a sphere of white light. The area of effect for this attack was quite wide, and instantly blew away the cloaks of those devils, who couldn't escape the range of this attack, revealing the true physical features of these followers of Baimajiao. Charred faces such as carbon, many places on their bodies were covered with numerous long and dense scales, and their appearances really did resemble that of a devil. It was obvious that their practice must have gone wrong at some point of time, and as a result, they ended up having such bizarre appearances, covered in scales. The Modeo-based power techniques had been handed down by the devil race itself in the past, and once practiced, it caused the genes in the human body to transform, and slowly, humans transformed into devils. This process was very painful and cruel, but those who practiced correctly could maintain their human appearances, and were called devil men. But just from looking at these old devils, it was obvious that they were failed products produced from the wrong way of practicing Modeo-based power techniques. And as a result of this failure, it was impossible for them to break through the barrier of Xiantian 5th stage for their whole lives. Modeo-based power techniques were cruel, however, the might granted by them was tremendous. Advancement was also very rapid, of course. There was a very serious side effect of transforming into half-devil freak, but so long as one was careful while practicing, one could avoid such a fate. The other side effect that these half-devil freaks had to live with was that they needed to kill humans and absorb their essence in order to maintain their own existence, because if they didn't kill, the machi inside their bodies would explode and kill them. Only those who obtained the heritage of elite and pure Modeo-based power techniques had a chance of successfully practicing the correct way. These cruel, bloodthirsty old devils wanted to kill Yi Shiwen and extract the vitality and blood out of his body. Their blood-red eyes were filled with greed while looking at Yi Shiwen from top to bottom. Boom! The claw of an old devil advanced towards Yi Shiwen and grasped, causing a loud air explosion, while the bloody chi instantly accumulated and advanced towards Yi Shiwen to grab him. Dang! Yi Shiwen maliciously chopped out his long blade, which directly clashed with the bloody claw of that old devil. But this clash issued a metal clashing sound in the surroundings. This old devil had refined his hands, and had already transformed them into spiritual weapons, which clearly displayed the distortion in their psyches. They clearly disregarded their own flesh and blood. Yi Shiwen retreated few steps, and the long blade began to dance in his hand, producing a curtain of blade shadows everywhere, which then isolated those old devils away from him. If there was only one old devil, then Yi Shiwen wouldn't care. But there were so many of these old devils, and Yi Shiwen was having a hard time dealing with all of them at once. Although these old devils were only at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage, but relying on the might of Modeo-based power techniques, they could easily compete with a master who had already entered into the realm of Xiantian Shao, which was the main reason why they were daring to be so incomparably rampant in front of Yi Shiwen. Hidden Dragon rises from the abyss. An old devil crashed into the curtain of blade shadows and was chopped down in 2 halves. But another one actually seized this opportunity to sneak an attack on Yi Shiwen. But he didn't waste even an instant and acted decisively by instantly using the first move of Coiling Dragon Palm against that old devil. Yi Shiwen suddenly felt a steady stream of Jin Qi being taken away from his body, which was far more in amount than other moves. But at that very instant, his hand instantly turned into a dragon claw. A cyan dragon claw shone brightly in this gloomy environment, suffused with a brilliant light. It directly descended towards that old devil and caught him in its grasp. Without getting any chance to react, that old devil was caught in the dragon claw made up of condensed Jin Qi. Yi Shiwen used his thought to manipulate the dragon claw and tightly clenched, and with a bang, the old devil turned into minced meat. Yi Shiwen had already practiced the move Hidden Dragon rises from the abyss to the Deshang realm, and it had not just led to a sudden increase in its power. Now he could transform a dragon whenever he wanted to, and he could also control the movements and shape of the dragon at will. Yi Shiwen beheaded 2 old devils, which reduced a lot of pressure on him. But at the same time, he ended up using a total of 10% of his Xiantian Jin Qi in the last move. In addition to that, he had also used his blade attacks to behead the scavengers earlier. So now, he could at most display this move for up to 8 times before completely exhausting the Jin Qi inside his body. But there were more than 8 old devils present there. Yi Shiwen didn't want to face such a situation, and wanted to get out of the trap of these old devils. So without any hesitation, he decided to call his red-crowned crane and whistled. Immediately in the sky, a long howling cry came from far away along with wing flapping sound. But immediately after that, yet another loud cry of a bird spread everywhere, and a huge shadow descended down from the sky. It was a giant eagle demon bird, and was larger than Yi Zaiwen's red-crowned crane. Had 2 huge eagle claws that looked cold and extremely aggressive. One must know that ordinary Xiantian warriors couldn't block these unstoppable claws. Above this demon bird stood a young man with an appearance of a 20-year-old guy, had an outstanding demeanor, clad in warrior-like brilliant clothing, carrying a double-edged sword, and his stern imposing aura was simply skyrocketing. "You evildoer, you really act recklessly. You actually dared to take a mission that you cannot handle alone." The young man shouted loudly, and the surrounding air actually began to surge up right after his loud shout spread. "One more human. This means more blood and food, ha ha ha. And this one also seems to be a disciple with profound cultivation." An old devil laughed and said. However, before his voice could fall, he was suddenly pierced by a terrifying sword key and died on the spot. "Acts recklessly," the young man coldly said. Yi Shiwen saw the symbol on the sleeves of the young man, and immediately relaxed, because he was a disciple of Yi Yuan's school. "Everyone run. This is a master of Xiantian 6th stage, or maybe above." These old devils were not stupid, and immediately scattered in all directions to escape. The young man waved his sword and instantly released sword key, which suddenly flew in all directions. And without getting enough time to escape, all 11 fleeing old devils were pierced by the sword key and died instantly. Just a moment ago, these old devils were trying to be quite arrogant in front of Yi Shiwen. But the scene reversed instantly, and they were all killed in a flash. Dash. Chapter 123. Prince Mo Yen. These old devils, who were trying to be rampant a moment ago, were not a match for this young man, and it was obvious that this young man's cultivation had already surpassed the peak of Xiantian 5th stage, and having a higher level of cultivation implied that he was definitely a core disciple. Using just the speech to cause the shock waves in the air, just like mighty waves in the ocean, was a method that could only be used by the masters of Xiantian 6th stage and above. Yi Shiwen could also create mighty shock waves in the air using the blast from his fists, but even he couldn't achieve such a feat to do that just by using his voice. To send shock waves in the air from just the speech required a terrifying aura possessed by masters of Xiantian 6th stage and above only. This was actually a result of manifestation of an expert's internal strength, already reaching a terrifying level. Myself Yi Shiwen, I thank Senior for saving me. Yi Shiwen approached the young man and said while cupping one hand into other across his chest, although he could have saved himself without the help. But he was still obliged to this young man for saving him and showed his gratitude. You are Yi Shiwen? The young man looked at Yi Shiwen, and it seemed that he already knew about Yi Shiwen and said with a smile, well-deserved reputation. It's a miracle that you were able to navigate through this desolate area, all the way to the stronghold of followers of Bai Majiao. Frankly speaking, you have accomplished a task that even the masters of Xiantian Shao realm cannot do alone. Senior brother is flattering. Yi Shiwen was not surprised to see that the young man already knew about him, because in a short time, he had gained a sudden fame in the Yiyuan school, especially after defeating Mo Han. Although he was just an inner disciple, but he still had gained reputation among the core disciples. Core disciples would always pay attention to the exceptionally strong and talented people like Yi Shiwen, because these people were generally seed disciples, or those comparable to seed disciples, and almost all of them were at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage, or in the Xiantian Shao realm, and no one knew when they would cross this threshold and would come on equal footing with the core disciples. So core disciples didn't treat these people as some ordinary inner disciples. It just so happens that we are in a need of more people to increase our strength. Brother Yi, this is a busy time, but would you like to lend your strength to us? The young man began to explain things to Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen came to know from this young man's mouth that his name was Zhuge Xingli, and he was a core disciple of Yiyuan school, and also received a mission from main sect to go and exterminate the followers of Bai Majiao. Few core disciples gathered together to ambush a powerful character among the followers of Bai Majiao called Prince Mo Yen. Prince Mo Yen was an illustrious and well-known character among the followers of Bai Majiao, and the rumors were that he was actually a prince of a small country, but later he was introduced into Bai Majiao, leading to the demise of a small but prosperous country. But he still didn't care and continued to follow the principles of Bai Majiao, and later, he became a core disciple of Bai Majiao. Now he was regarded as a very important personality in Bai Majiao. And this time, during the sudden upheaval of Bai Majiao, Prince Mo Yen was playing quite an important role, and it was necessary to deal with him as soon as possible. So, Zhuge Xingli and others assembled to jointly ambush Prince Mo Yen, and Zhuge Xingli wanted Yi Shiwen to also participate along with them and lend them his strength, because he didn't know when they might need an extra hand, because dealing with Prince Mo Yen could be tricky, and he wanted to increase the chances of success for this mission. Zhuge Xingli got this idea in a spur of the moment, because Yi Shiwen had already gained the recognition of him and other core disciples, and they wouldn't mind letting him into their team. Also, Prince Mo Yen was supposed to pass from here, and Zhuge Xingli was responsible for the lookout, and also to warn any nearby disciples. But he couldn't use signal to warn them, because it would alert the enemy, so he was surveilling this area on his eagle, when he found Yi Shiwen dealing with several old devils, and decided to help. Prince Mo Yen was a big fat fish, and there was a big reward of 50,000 spirit stones on his head. Having a rank of core disciple in Bai Majiao was definitely rare. And in addition to that, he was the mastermind behind the rebellion of Bai Majiao in these regions. If they were able to successfully ambush and catch him, then this would surely be a big catch and beneficial for everyone involved in the mission. Yi Shiwen decided to accept the offer of Zhuge Xingli, because he also very much loathed the methods and practices of followers of Bai Majiao. These people were disgusting and despicable, and he would gladly participate in their extermination. After determining this next course of action, Yi Shiwen began reciting, sending people to afterlife, for the salvation of these souls who were brutally killed by the followers of Bai Majiao in the worst ways possible. Although he was aware that these people might have their souls completely sucked out and swallowed, but there still remained their grievances and resentment in the air. And if not prayed now, over time, this place would gradually turn a gloomy accumulation of yin qi, which would corrupt the atmosphere. And attracted to the accumulated yin qi, ghosts from all over would flock into this area and turn this place unlivable for people. A long time ago, during the formation of Great Yu State, there were several times when large mutinies occurred and several thousand soldiers fought on the battlefields and died horrifying deaths. At that time of turmoil of wars, no one had time to pray for the souls of dead soldiers, who were constantly driven to unjustified deaths. Wars continued to flourish in the process of building of the Great Yu State, and several battlefields were gradually infested with ghost soldiers who couldn't leave the mortal world and were bound to these battlefields. Sunlight didn't reach these battlefields, only a chill was spread throughout, and if ordinary people tired to go close, then froth would start to come out of their mouths. Yin qi would invade their bodies, leading to their deaths. Even warriors, exuberating with vitality, were afraid to go deep into these areas infested with ghosts. Although situation here wouldn't turn that bad compared to those battlefields, but since Yi Shiwen was already here, he was unable to leave this alone, and had a moral obligation to do whatever he could for the dead. After finishing the recitation of Send People to Afterlife, the resentment and grievances filling the air finally disappeared. Yin qi was still present and hadn't completely vanished, but this amount was less than critical, and the most troublesome thing was the lingering resentment that completely vanished after Yi Zaiwen's prayer. As far as yin qi was concerned, under the exposure of the sun, it would soon disappear. Yi Shiwen, along with Zhuge Xingli, rode the eagle and soon arrived at the gathering place of many core disciples. Behind a hill, there was a gathering of roughly 20 disciples of Yi Yuan school. This group was being led by 3 core disciples. Zhuge Xingli gave their introduction one by one to Yi Shiwen. The first one looked more like a short and stout merchant with a sort of smile on his fat face, and was quite famous among core disciples, called Xiaojin, and it was said that he came from a merchant aristocratic clan. And although he was considered very strong, but his merchant skills were even stronger, which ultimately made him quite famous among the core disciples. Next to Xiaojin stood a beautiful woman clad in black clothes, appeared to be 20 years old, and was also a famous core disciple, called Shui Yuan. Next to Shui Yuan stood a young man clad in blue clothes, and there was a sword in his hand, and was a core disciple called Zheng Yizhao. However, he wasn't famous like others, and was just nobody among the core disciples. And this time, these 4 core disciples together took the mission to ambush Prince Mo Yen, and this group was being led by them. As for the rest of the 20 disciples, they were inner disciples recruited by these 4 core disciples to assist in this mission. But none of them were ordinary disciples. Each of them possessed deep breath, dignified appearance, and weakest among them was at the peak Xiantian 5th stage. Also there were some who had already reached the Xiantian Shao realm, and were considered leading figures among the inner disciples. But in this mission, they could only play the supporting role. However, there wasn't the slightest dissatisfaction present on their faces, because they clearly knew what kind of character Prince Mo Yin actually was. In the future, he would most likely become one of the giant figures of Bai Majiao, and also among the Modeo practitioners. When they came to know that Yi Shiwen was the newest addition to this group, they were quite surprised. After all, he hadn't accumulated small fame during these past days, but not many recognized him from his appearance. Chapter 124. These people were called the elites of Yi Yuan school, and being Xiantian realm warriors, they were all very fast, and as soon they heard about the mission of ambushing Prince Mo Yen, they soon came into action, which was the reason why all of them came prepared to do their best for the mission. They were aware of the fact that Prince Mo Yen was not someone they could take lightly and knew that there was a great degree of risk involved in this mission. Everyone sat down in repose and closed their eyes. Yi Shiwen was no exception. He also found a small tree and sat down under it cross-legged and started the unceasing deduction of martial arts in the special space inside his mind. making every effort to seek more progress before the plan of ambushing Prince Mo Yen was put into action. As for others, it was simply impossible to have a progress in such a short time. But Yi Zaiwen's case was different, because he showed constant progress all the time, and almost every day, one could see a progress in his strength and cultivation. At present, Yi Shiwen was at the peak of Xiantian 3rd stage, and was waiting for just one opportunity to be able to go further and break into the Xiantian 4th stage. His body was completely filled with Xiantian Jin Qi, and was in extreme condition, and one could say that he was only a step away from that one opportunity to be able to transform his Zhen Qi into Zhen Yuan. The so-called Zhen Yuan was more advanced and purer form of energy compared to Zhen Qi, and although it was considered tough, but it was possible to transform the Zhen Qi inside the body into Zhen Yuan. Compared to Zhen Qi, the might of Zhen Yuan was enormous and simple and inconceivable, and after successfully transforming Zhen Yuan, the cultivation and strength would break into a new level by incredible proportions, far from what a master of Xiantian 5th stage could imagine. If Yi Shiwen could break into Xiantian 4th stage, by transforming the Zhen Qi in his body into Zhen Yuan, then his fighting strength would become comparable to that of Xiantian 6th stage masters. And at that time, he would be able to compete with core disciples. After the curtain of night fell, the disciples restrained their breaths, and hid themselves in the forest in order to prepare the ambush for Prince Mo Yen. If they weren't careful, then there was a chance of being discovered by the enemy. And among them, the Yi Shiwen was the one who most thoroughly hid himself, because he had already practiced restraining breath technique to the Desheng level, and could easily hide his presence. The moonlight was spread everywhere, and the distant roars of demon beasts could be heard. Then, suddenly and abruptly, almost all of disciples of Yi Yuan school opened their eyes, and to their surprise, they turned around and saw a group of several hundred densely packed followers of Bai Majiao. There were grim looks on their faces, and were looking at them with their cutthroat gazes, which was quite frightening. "It's not good, be careful everyone." Zhuge Zinglis' loud shout alerted everyone. But at this time, those followers of Bai Majiao finally began to take action. At the back of their group, a row of followers sat down in a circle on the ground, and one by one, strange pentagram patterns appeared on the ground, and the Lingqi instantly began to rage up wildly in the air. Under the manipulation of the followers, the raging Lingqi rose up into the sky, and suddenly formed an overwhelming arrow rain, which completely blotted the sky. Whoosh! 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 A shrill piercing sound came, and along with it, an endless number of arrows instantly rained down from the sky towards the disciples of Yi Yuan school. The complexions of the disciples suddenly paled when they looked towards the sky, and saw the rain of numerous arrows. Even a slight carelessness could lead them to get shot by countless arrows, and then their appearance would be similar to a hedgehog. These weren't ordinary arrows, because an ordinary arrow couldn't harm the masters of Xiantian realm, but arrows made up of Lingqi were very deadly, and could cause an instant death of a Xiantian master if shot. Damn it, how can there be so many Bai Majiao devil bastards? Xiao Jing cursed out loud, then waved his hand, and suddenly, a huge hand congealed in the sky, and went towards the incoming arrow rain, and with a grasping movement, it caught thousands of Lingqi arrows, which caused a loud explosion. Damn it! With a clang sound, Yi Shiwen took out his long blade, and instantly formed a blade curtain in the midair to protect his body. At this time, the might of Missing Moon Beheader completely manifested itself. Dealing with many warriors of lower cultivation levels, using a blade technique against them was a very good strategy, and a blade could be used as a killing device when fighting in group warfare against many opponents. But even so, it would not last in long-term battle. However, other disciples were not at ease like Yi Shiwen, and those disciples at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage had to come together in groups, and each group had to resist a section of the arrow rain. So for the time being, they did not have any safety issues. They lacked the superior might of Yi Zaiwen's Missing Moon Beheader, a sure-shot killing technique especially made up to be used in group warfare, but they could still protect themselves by joining forces. But all of this was nothing compared to the profound skills of Zhuge Xingli and the other 3 core disciples, who formed shields to protect themselves, while they also had the room to move around in this arrow rain. You are courting death. Zhuge Xingli sneered, and it seemed as if his figure turned into a lightning and flew high into the sky, while the sword danced in his hand, and in a flash, a long dragon made up of dazzling light congealed out of nowhere and swooped towards those followers of Bai Majiao. The followers of Bai Majiao were only at the Xiantian 4th or 5th stage, and couldn't block this incredible attack, and were sliced in half through their waists. A burst of bloody mist spread in the air along with their painful screams. And taking advantage of this opportunity, Shui Yuan immediately came into action and stretched out her plain white hands. And a huge palm congealed in the air and pressed down towards the circular arrangement of the followers who were manipulating the arrow rain. Boom! The huge palm directly pressed down on them. These followers screamed pitifully and were pressed into meat patties without getting any chance to fight back. Come out already, could it be that you want us to kill all of your minions? At this time, Zheng Yizhao coldly said, Ha ha ha! The disciples of Yiyuan school really have various tricks up their sleeves. No wonder you actually dare to ambush this prince. Truly courageous, I must say. Suddenly a loud laughter came from far away, and everyone looked towards the source of laughter, and saw a person's shadow, riding an unusual beast, flying towards them from a distant place. All of the disciples of Yiyuan school took a closer look at this shadow, and actually saw a very cold and gloomy-looking young man dressed in black long robes. He slowly jumped down from the head of an unusual beast. Prince Mo Yen. Zhuge Xingli stared at the young man, and said while keeping a close eye on him. The disciples of Yiyuan school were tensed for a moment. Even Yi Shiwen also increased his vigilance. After all, this enemy was not someone even the core disciples could easily take on, so they all needed to be careful and attentive at all times. Zhuge Xingli, I've heard your name before, one of the top players among the core disciples of Yiyuan school, and a very dependable guy, but with all your unparalleled intellectual abilities, you still fell into the trap of this prince. Prince Mo Yin sneered and said. The complexions on the faces of many disciples of Yiyuan school immediately became unsightly. Their mission was to ambush Prince Mo Yin, but now it looked like they themselves fell into the trap set up by him. Today is the day of your death, Prince Mo Yen. You have come at the very right time, because you have walked right into a trap, and it's a dead end for you. Brother Luo, a true disciple, is not far from here, and when he arrives here, you will die. Xiao Jin said. Chapter 125, Xiantian 4th Stage. At the mention of the name of a true disciple, Luo Yifan, the morale of many disciples suddenly picked up momentum. Fortunately, a true disciple was nearby, and as long as they could pin down these devils would have no way to escape death once Luo Yifan would arrive. Although Prince Mo Yen was strong, but he was just at the level of core disciples, of course, he couldn't compete with a true disciple like Luo Yifan. And even if it was the weakest of the true disciples, their Xiantian states were still incomparably powerful, and way beyond the reach of core disciples. Prince Mo Yen coldly sneered and said, Perhaps you shouldn't wait. And do you really think that this prince wouldn't be prepared after understanding your plot? Right now, that true disciple should be wrapped up in a fight with my master. And even if he escapes, you actually expect him to be able to rescue you. Ha ha ha, what a joke. The Prince Mo Yen said, and a half-dead person's figure could be seen in his grasp. The complexions of Zhuge Xingli and others suddenly turned unsightly, because this half-dead person was their informant, who had informed them that Prince Mo Yen was going to pass from here, but they didn't expect him to be caught. And due to that, their plan had long been seen through by the enemy. Damn it, this guy was secretly plotting with outsiders against me. Prince Mo Yen said. A murderous look appeared on his face, then his claw caught that half-dead person's body, followed by a burst of his screams. Then at a speed not visible by naked eyes, that person's body was completely sucked dry. This time you must die. Prince Mo Yen swept his cold gaze towards the disciples of Yiyuan school and said. In the distant sky, everyone saw 10 figures flying towards them, along with constant pitter-patter. Taking advantage of the faint moonlight, Yi Shiwen saw that they were humanoid monsters, about 2 meters tall, and whole body was densely covered in black scales, had fierce eyes and ominous-looking long fangs, 2 horns on head and 1 pair of bat wings on the back that were continuously flapping and flashing. Great devils! Many disciples instantly recognized this creature. One must know that there were various species of devils in the devil world, and among them, just the number of intelligent species were in millions, of which the largest and most widely circulated in the legends of Wuxia was undoubtedly the Great Devil. There were a lot of great devils in the devil race, and in the previous devil invasion on Wuxia, great devils were sent in large numbers and were the main force and also the cannon fodder. Although these great devils played the role of cannon fodder in the devil army, but they were extremely strong and were already at peak of Hotian realm at the time of birth. After reaching adulthood, their cultivation could grow up to Xiantian 6th stage, or even more, which made it very tough to deal with them. Yi Shiwen and other disciples had not really seen a great devil before, but it didn't mean that they did not know about them. In Great Yu State, the number of followers of Bai Majiao was not many, especially when compared to sects like Yi Yuan School and several other major sects. So each time they would rebel, a lot of great devils were mixed in to increase the strength of their forces. Damn these filthy beasts! Zhuge Xingla's complexion became unsightly after the sudden appearance of these great devils, because their arrival indicated that Prince Mo Yin was planning to butcher them in one fell swoop. These foolish humans dare to stop our great devil race's army. It seems they really do not know wish to live anymore. Jia. I just came over from the devil world and happened to catch so much fresh blood. A great devil stretched out its scarlet tongue and licked its black lips and strangely laughed. The thoughts of these great devils and those followers of Bai Majiao was exactly the same, and they only regarded humans as fresh blood. It could be said that the followers of Bai Majiao had inherited this depraved behavior from the actual devils. How audacious! You think that this is your devil world. You are in Wuxia, but still dare to be so arrogant. Zhang Yizhao sneered and looked towards the 10 great devils with an intense disgust and killing intent present in his eyes. Do not listen to their nonsense, begin! Prince Mo Yin shouted loudly and ordered his troops of Bai Majiao followers and great devils to attack, while at the same time, a sharp trident appeared in his hand, and simply like a black lightning, he instantly rushed towards Zhuge Xingli. And at this time, those 10 great devils shrieked, and each of them took out a spear and flew towards the other 3 core disciples. The war broke out instantly. Zhuge Xingli and Prince Mo Yin fiercely clashed, and their strengths was on par with each other. If Zhuge Xingli was not confident of his own strength, then he would not have dared to lead this mission to ambush Prince Mo Yin. Other than Zhuge Xingli, who was currently busy fighting with Prince Mo Yin, each of the other 3 core disciples instantly took on 3 great devils. And although these devils were known as cannon fodder, in addition to their great population in devil world, their strength was the same as the other experts at the same cultivation level. However, when fighting 3 versus 9, the number played a major role, and due to that, the 3 core disciples were being pressed down by the combined strength of great devils, and were struggling to resist. The remaining 1 great devil, leading thousands of followers of Bai Majiao, rushed towards the 20 or so inner disciples. Suddenly the complexions of these inner disciples became pale. There were several hundred of these Bai Majiao followers, and among them, there were dozens at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage, and majority of them were at the Xiantian 4th stage. But if all these followers attacked at once, then they would have no chance of survival. Even if all of them were considered elites, and one of the players of Yi Yuan were school, but they were still helpless in front of an army of Bai Majiao followers. Not to mention, there was a core disciple level of great devil leading this army. They simply couldn't resist. Jia, you foolish human beings, you just stay there and obediently give me your fresh blood. The great devil laughed strangely, and instantly threw his long spear towards a disciple at the peak of Xiantian 5th stage. Pucci, that long spear stabbed right into that disciple, without giving him a chance to react. He was stabbed right through his heart and died on the spot, and his body was nailed to the ground by the spear. Also, the blood that flowing out was polluted and black in color. Immediately the morale of the inner disciples dropped down, If they were facing only those by Ma Jiao followers, then they wouldn't be so afraid. Although these followers were large in numbers and depraved, but were still humans. And as long as they could form a joint self-protection method, they would still hold their ground for some time against these followers. But they just didn't know how to deal with the great devil that was at the Xiantian 6th stage. Jie, that's right, you all give me your fresh blood obediently. The great devil strangely laughed and said, "Did the devils also give you fresh blood in the devil world, you filthy beast?" Suddenly the sound of a loud explosion came from the group of inner disciples, and a terrifying blade light instantly chopped out and plunged toward the great devil. The great devil quickly lifted his hand to block. Dang! A metal clashing sound spread, and the blade light chopped through the black scales on the arm of the great devil, and actually split them. The defensive strength of these scales was almost no less than that of high-grade inner armor. Everyone gave dumbfounded looks to Yi Shiwen, while he was slowly walking out of the group with a long blade in his hand, and saying, "If you have really lost the courage to deal with this filthy beast, then you might as well just take a sword and commit suicide." Many disciples suddenly felt a burst of shame. They were called elite among the elites, and were the so-called genius inner disciples. They were supposed to hold an invincible heart, and pursue the peak of martial arts. Ascend to the peak to get a broad view of the world. Yes, that's right, killing these beasts is no big deal. Kill these filthy beasts. The morale of the inner disciples suddenly rose back again. Upon seeing this, the great devil immediately roared, and suddenly stretched his hand as if to grasp something. The spear instantly returned to its hand. The cold tip of the spear flashed, and immediately flew towards Yi Shiwen. Bang! Yi Ziwen's long blade severely clashed with the spear, and a terrifying explosion sound spread everywhere, and sent shock waves in all directions. The enormous strength of Great Devil forced Yi Shiwen 5 or 6 steps back, while that Great Devil stood there motionless. The strength of Great Devil itself was much larger than humans, not to mention it was at the Xiantian 6th stage, so its strength was ridiculously enormous. The strength of more than 100 dragons was absolutely embedded in its body, and at this time, all of this strength completely broke out. Yi Shiwen was shaken by this enormous strength, but he tightened his chest, and almost did not spout blood, but the look in his eyes was firmer than before, while he was coldly staring at the great devil. The great devil loudly roared, and it seemed that he was outraged by Yi Ziwen's stubbornness. It immediately waved the long spear and rushed towards Yi Shiwen. It was so fast that the black scales were causing friction with the air and spreading red sparks, and an intense flaming devil shot straight to stab Yi Shiwen. This marksmanship had been immersed deep in the bone marrow of these great devils, and they were considered to have attained the peak of marksmanship skills. Yi Shiwen didn't care, just clenched his teeth and rushed up towards the great devil. And at the same time, the tyrant body technique was fully operational. Bang! 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 The two sides rushed towards each other at a breakneck speed, and severely clashed into each other. Every time, Yi Shiwen was thrown back few steps, but he would still attack again, and each time, there was a constant decrease in the number of steps he was thrown back by the enormous strength of Great Devil. The Zhen Qi was crazily surging inside his body. His black hair was flying wildly, although he was being constantly repulsed, but the imposing aura of his body was actually very intense, and no different from a tyrant from ancient times who seemed to have come back to life. At this time, the tyrant body technique truly manifested itself in the body of Yi Shiwen, making both his body and imposing aura invincible like a fearless tyrant. The Zhen Qi was crazily surging in his, and each time he was repulsed, the imposing aura would also have a crazy ascension. The great devil sensed this sudden change in Yi Shiwen, and was secretly scared. He was completely unable to imagine how Yi Shiwen could actually be so terrifying. It didn't know what power technique he had practiced to actually make him so scary, although it was a cruel bloodthirsty devil, but not stupid. When it sensed that Yi Shiwen was close to having a breakthrough, it decided that it would absolutely not let him to break. Go die! The great devil shouted, and instantly stuck the spear towards Yi Shiwen, which also caused the storms in the air. It was obvious that Great Devil's aim was to immediately kill Yi Shiwen without any delay, Bang! Yi Shiwen raised his hand, and the long blade fiercely clashed with the spear, setting off a terrifying blast wave in the surrounding area. Yi Shiwen just felt an enormous force entering his body. His bones made a crackling sound, and it seemed that his body would explode under this intense pressure. The Zhen Qi was crazily revolving inside his body. Breakthrough! 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 Yi Shiwen was constantly shouting in his heart, while under the pressure of the enormous strength, the Zhen Qi took a spherical shape inside his body. Boom! Under the enormous suppressive strength, Yi Zaiwen's tyrant body technique finally broke through the Deshang of second layer. The strength of dragons started to increase from his current strength of 100 dragons. Strength of 101 dragons. Strength of 102 dragons. Yi Zaiwen's inner state was finally driven by the enormous strength of Great Devil, and broke into the Xiantian 4th stage. While at the same time, he felt that the Zhen Qi in his body was being transformed into a steady stream of a new and formidable energy. Chapter 126. Situation reversed within Yi Zaiwen's body. A steady stream of Xiantian Zhen Qi was transforming into a liquid energy, and he could feel the great might flowing in his body. Yi Zaiwen's imposing aura was still unceasingly soaring, and his power had not yet climbed to the top. How is this possible? The Great Devil was giving dumbfounded looks to Yi Shiwen. Just how could someone have so much progress at once after the breakthrough, and the rise in his strength had not yet stopped? It had seen the breakthrough from the peak of Xiantian 5th stage into the Xiantian 6th stage, but had never seen so much increase in strength at once. Yi Zaiwen's imposing aura was gradually rising, and was currently at the strength of 120 dragons. But this rise in strength didn't stop. How could there be such a terrifying person, such a terrifying power technique? Just what kind of power technique did he practice to display such a bizarre increase in strength? During the breakthrough, the Xiantian Zhen Qi in Yi Zaiwen's body had not completely converted into Zhen Yuan. In fact, just converted 1/3. But he already gained the strength of 120 dragons. Yi Shiwen estimated that until the complete conversion is over, he could have the strength of 150 dragons, although this was far less than the strength limit of 199 dragons granted by the Xiantian 6th stage. But it was definitely far more than this Great Devil that seemed to have recently entered into the Xiantian 6th stage. How is this possible? The Great Devil roared, and once more launched an attack at Yi Shiwen. Its spear tilted at a strange angle in the air, and pierced towards Yi Shiwen like a lightning. Yi Shiwen sneered and instantly chopped out his long blade, and a blade light containing the just transformed Zhen Yuan, which was far more tyrannical than blade light containing Zhen Qi, instantly routed the spear in the midair, and Yi Zaiwen's long blade severely chopped down on the spear. Dang! A horrifying explosive sound echoed when the weapons severely clashed into each other, and the reverberations went back and impacted on the bodies of Yi Shiwen and Great Devil. But this time, the situation completely reversed. Yi Shiwen just stood there motionless holding his long blade, while the Great Devil was thrown back, and his hand was completely shaken along with a deep wound on its palm. The spear also fell on the ground. Great Devil stared at Yi Shiwen with its big eyes filled with astonishment. But Yi Shiwen didn't wait, and again chopped out his long blade, which released a dazzling blade light instantly towards Great Devil. When Great Devil saw this attack, this time, it didn't try to block and immediately, and crazily retreated several steps back, in order to avoid Yi Zaiwen's terrifying blade attack, which seemed to possess an incredible might. Yi Shiwen rushed forward and again chopped his long blade, releasing a dazzling blade light, which flashed then instantly reached the Great Devil, and without getting any chance to dodge this time, it screamed pitifully while its arm was severed by Yi Shiwen. This was the first time that on the cruel and bloodthirsty face of this Great Devil, the look of horror and panic finally appeared. It realized that it might die, and that too at the hands of a human. It just couldn't accept that how could there be such a frightening human? Seeing that Yi Shiwen completely overwhelmed a Great Devil, suddenly the morale of those inner disciples, who were losing their ground while fighting against the followers of Bai Majiao, increased dramatically. They felt that they could still be saved, they still had a hope. And this hope was Yi Shiwen. Yi Shiwen did not know that he had already become a savior in the eyes of others, because right now in his eyes, the only remaining goal was to first kill this great devil. Yi Zaiwen's imposing aura firmly locked on Great Devil's body, while he was looking coldly at it, because he was aware of the cruel nature of these great devils, and felt not one shred of sympathy for them. The great devil clearly understood that it was not a match of Yi Shiwen, and if it tried to fight him, he would surely be killed. The imposing aura of Yi Shiwen completely overshadowed its own imposing aura, and it sensed that the strength of Yi Shiwen was currently at the strength of 130 dragons, which was absolutely frightening. The great devil didn't even have a chance to pick up the tattered spear from the ground, and suddenly flew away, skimming into the crowd of followers of Bai Majiao. Yi Shiwen sneered and said, "Want to escape?" Without the slightest hesitation, Yi Shiwen immediately chased down after it. He flew high into the sky and mercilessly crashed into the crowd of followers by Ma Jiao. Yi Shiwen did not restrain his breath, and severely crashed into the followers of Bai Ma Jiao, and his enormous might scattered in all directions, which instantly formed a storm. Several followers of Bai Ma Jiao didn't get enough time to dodge, and were sent flying, suddenly ejected a mouthful of blood, and simply lost consciousness. These followers were only at the Xiantian 4th or 5th stage, and it was obviously impossible for them to fight an expert like Yi Shiwen, whose fighting strength was now comparable to that of an expert at Xiantian 6th stage. In the Xiantian realm, there was a difference of heaven and earth between Xiantian 5th stage and Xiantian 6th stage. Not only the masters of Xiantian 5th stage lacked strength, they also lacked the incredible might granted by the transformed Xiantian Jin Yuan. So it was simply impossible for Xiantian 5th stage warriors to compete with warriors of Xiantian 6th stage. Although Yi Shiwen had not yet reached the Xiantian 6th stage, but he was able to transform the Xiantian Jin Qi inside his body into Xiantian Jin Yuan, which was now comparable to the masters of Xiantian 6th stage, and these followers of Bai Ma Jiao were simply not his opponent. Puchi, Yi Zaiwen's long blade directly split in half the body of a follower of Bai Ma Jiao, and while his blade was still flashing with blade light, he again chopped out blade light towards the escaping great devil. The great devil was very cunning. It ran towards the place where there were many followers, in an attempt to use the followers of Bai Ma Jiao to block the blade attacks of Yi Shiwen, aimed at him from the back. In its view, these followers of Bai Ma Jiao were no different than the humans it despised, and didn't care whether they lived or died. But Yi Shiwen repeatedly dodged, and made his way through the crowd of using the amazing maneuver skills of Celestial Step that he had already practiced to the Desheng level. Using the agility skill, he quickly crossed through the crowd of followers of Bai Ma Jiao, following the trail of Great Devil, which he also enveloped himself in a curtain of blade light. And whenever the followers of Bai Ma Jiao would try to approach this curtain of blade light, they would either be killed or disabled. And this was because Yi Shiwen was in a hurry to kill the Great Devil. Otherwise he would not be running past these followers. Rather he would have killed all of them. Blade strike. Killed. Another blade strike. Continued to kill. Within few breaths' time, more than 30 followers of Bai Ma Jiao were either killed or disabled at the hands of Yi Shiwen. Suddenly those followers of Bai Ma Jiao started to spread out to make way for Yi Shiwen. They did not dare anymore to get close to him, although their devil worship was not false. But they were selfish and ruthless, and didn't want to sacrifice themselves in order to save the great devil. These lowly humans are really unreliable. When Great Devil saw the followers of Bai Ma Jiao making way for Yi Shiwen instead of stopping him, he couldn't help but curse them out loud. Yi Shiwen wasn't one bit distracted by these followers of Bai Ma Jiao, and he quickly caught up with the Great Devil. Yi Zaiwen's face was deadpan, and this time, with almost each breath, he could obviously feel his strength getting more formidable, and jumped to catch up with the Great Devil. He shouted and released 10 meters long Daomong from his blade, and this Daomong, which seemed to have been released by the god of death itself, continued to harvest life, and several Bai Ma Jiao followers who were in its path were instantly crushed and turned into minced meat, while it went all the way straight towards the Great Devil, and crashed into its body with a boom. Puchi! The Daomong penetrated through the scales, and entered into its body, and cut out a huge hole. Boom! Everyone heard a loud bang when the zhenqi inside the great devil's body exploded, and its muscular body instantly burst into a ball of minced meat and disappeared in the air. Everyone froze for a moment as no one expected this outcome, where Yi Shiwen would actually be able to behead a great devil, because this was simply a miracle, especially for Zhuge Xingli and other core disciples. They were just hoping for the inner disciples to last a little longer, but did not expect that their team would to be able to have such an astonishing comeback thanks to Yi Shiwen. After beheading the great devil, Yi Zaiwen's imposing aura finally reached its peak, and his strength also rose all the way up to the strength of 150 dragons. He reached the peak of the currently attainable strength. Yi Shiwen felt an unprecedented strength in his body, and even during breathing, he could change the surrounding air to resonate together, and even without using the zhenqi or zhenyuan, now his casual shout could send shock waves in the surrounding air. This was the feat only attainable by the masters of Xiantian's 6th stage, and above which clearly showed that Yi Zaiwen's might was far more than the masters of the Xiantian Shao realm. Yi Shiwen, be careful! Suddenly Zhuge Xingli's loud shout came from a distant place. A glow of terrifying dim light shot from afar came straight towards Yi Shiwen. Even after having the breakthrough, Yi Shiwen still felt a chill down his spine, and his body instinctively reacted. And using Celestial Step, he took a step and his body went several meters away, and evaded the incoming attack. Boom! The place where he was standing an instant ago, the dim glowing light blasted a big hole. Yi Zaiwen's body was covered in cold sweat, and thought that if he had received the attack a moment ago, then even if considering his current body strength, he would have sustained seriously injuries. Yi Shiwen immediately got his composure back, and looked towards the source of the attack. It was actually Prince Mo Yen behind that attack, and at this time, there was an unwilling look on his face because Yi Shiwen managed to dodge his attack. Do not even think about trying to shoot again. Zhuge Xingli was suddenly overjoyed after witnessing the breakthrough of Yi Shiwen, because he understood that the key to break this deadlock was none other than Yi Shiwen, and immediately attacked Prince Mo Yen, as he absolutely couldn't allow him to attack Yi Shiwen once again. At this time, Yi Shiwen no longer hesitated, and attacked the followers of Bai Majiao. Although he was currently not a match of Prince Mo Yen, but dealing with these Bai Majiao followers was not a big deal for him. Shua! 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 Yi Zaiwen's Daoguang flashed and rushed right into the crowd of Bai Majiao followers, killing and injuring many of them. And suddenly, the pressure greatly reduced on the inner disciples of Yiyuan school. And due to the lessened pressure, the inner disciples felt relaxed. However, the core disciples who were fighting with other great devils couldn't hold their ground anymore, and it seemed that they would lose any time. There was a cruel smile on the face of Prince Mo Yen, because in his view, as long as his plan was successful, the deaths of these ordinary Bai Majiao followers wasn't worth much. Then suddenly, a long howl came from the horizon. Chapter 127. Did you kill Luo Tian? Then suddenly, a long howl came from the horizon. From the outset, for a while, that long howl continued to come from the horizon, but almost after an instant, it was not very far away from everyone, and as the howl grew closer and louder, the entire air began to vibrate, producing layer after layer of mighty shockwaves. The complexions on everyone's face suddenly paled, because this person's skill was extremely terrifying. He was actually so far from them, and could still cause such a level of change in the atmosphere. The display of such a might was impossible for a master of Xiantian realm. True master. The complexion on Prince Mo Yan's face suddenly paled, because he also heard this loud howl, and immediately recognized that this was not his master from Bai Majiao. He quickly made the decision, jumped upon the unusual beast and shouted, "Retreat!" Prince Mo Yan's loud shout spread throughout, and immediately after that, whether it was those great devils or Bai Majiao followers, without wasting any time, they threw down their opponents and turned back to escape. Should we chase after them? Xiaojin asked. Well, we don't chase. A tottering foe should not be chased recklessly. And they escaped just because they fear brother Luo Yifan, not us. Zhuge Xingli said, while looking at the retreating back profile of Prince Mo Yen, Xiao Jing clearly understood, as he knew what kind of dreadful existence this brother Luo Yifan actually was. Yi Shiwen looked at the rapidly escaping figures of Prince Mo Yen and his minions inside. This Prince Mo Yen was quite a fierce and ambitious character, who showed his decisive nature while killing enemies. And when it came to retreating in the face of danger, he again didn't waste any time and immediately escaped. Quick decision-making abilities along with ruthless nature made him quite a troublesome foe. However, Yi Shiwen couldn't think about this for long, because when he was thinking, a person's figure suddenly appeared on a tree branch not far away from him. It was actually a youth clad in blue robe, and appeared 28 or 29 years old, and a formidable imposing aura was unceasingly coming out of his body. Brother Luo, Senior Yifan. Brother Luo. Zhuge Xingli and the 3 core disciples took the lead and immediately approached him to greet. But those inner disciples somewhat hesitated as they didn't recognize this youth. After all, they were separated by a layer, accessible only to the core disciples. In addition to that, those true disciples were quite elusive, and it was hard to even barely catch a glimpse of them. Unless someone was quite intimate with a true disciple, ordinary people didn't have any means to approach them. This time we were lucky that Brother Luo was nearby and came to our rescue. Otherwise, we would really be in a big trouble, Zhuge Xingli said in a respectful manner. The scene abruptly changed in the field. Everyone was stunned. They just couldn't understand why Luo Yifan, one of the true disciples, would suddenly attack Yi Shiwen. And the ones who were surprised the most were Zhuge Xingli and other core disciples. Although Yi Shiwen just had a breakthrough, and his strength was now comparable to that of core disciples, but it was not going to help him in front of an existence like Luo Yifan. Yi Shiwen felt that a horrifying imposing aura was crushing his body, while at the same time, the Zhen Yuan was madly rushing and revolving inside his body in order to resist the intense pressure of Luo Yifan's imposing aura. If he had not already transformed Zhen Qi into Zhen Yuan inside his body, then it was possible that this imposing aura would have made him to kneel down on the ground. It was as if he was facing a beast from ancient times, trying to bite him with its intensely strong jaws. Yi Shiwen's body was being crushed with such an enormous strength that his bones started to make crackling sounds. Brother Luo, what's this all about? Shui Yuan hurriedly asked because she couldn't understand why Luo Yifan would suddenly attack Yi Shiwen. Yi Ziwen's whole body was covered in cold sweat, so much sweat that it completely soaked his clothes. His complexion was somewhat pale. This was the first time he felt the horrifying strength of a true master, and even if his fighting strength was now comparable to that of the core disciples, but there are a difference of heaven and earth between the core disciples and true disciples. Brother Luo, what's the meaning of this? Yi Ziwen's body was trembling, and he clenched his teeth and asked while trying to resist the overwhelming imposing aura. Say, did you kill Luo Tian? Luo Yifan said, and his voice came like the roar of a fierce lion, and caused a violent storm which directly impacted on Yi Ziwen's mind, and directly snatched the control of his mind, and now, he wouldn't be able to lie or hold secrets even if he wanted to. And when asked, he must answer the truth out loud. I don't know about this Luo Tian guy. At this most critical moment, the special space in his mind suddenly sent intermittent rays of light, which completely shielded his mind and soul. And right at this very instant, Yi Shiwen regained control over his mind and quickly answered. Yi Shiwen was startled in his heart. This thing never came in his mind that Luo was the surname of both Luo Tian and Luo Yifan, and there was a possibility that they were actually members of the same clan. But at this time, Yi Shiwen wasn't in a position to ask anything to clear his doubts. He must pretend that he did not know Luo Tian. He absolutely couldn't tell the truth. Yi Shiwen knew that if he admitted that he was the one who killed Luo Tian, then this Luo Yifan wouldn't hesitate one bit, and would definitely kill him, right there in front of everyone. The status of a true disciple was equivalent to that of the elders. Having the backing of such an incredible master, no wonder Luo Tian was audacious enough to actually dare to intercept Hua Menghan. Luo Yifan's eyes were flashing with killing intent, while keeping a close eye on Yi Shiwen, and seemed to be considering whether he was speaking truth or not. He was suspicious because he got some clues that Yi Shiwen was possibly related to Luo Tian's death. That day, Luo Tian acted recklessly by planning to intercept Hua Menghan and died in vain. Hua Menghan was the first disciple of the Lord of Full Moon Peak, and her status was equivalent to the status of a true disciple, so he couldn't get his hands on her. But Yi Ziwen's case was different. He was just one of the several thousand inner disciples. And even if he was killed by a true disciple like Luo Yifan, it would be considered as punishment and nothing else. Therefore he used a sound wave-based martial arts tactic to directly attack Yi Ziwen's mind and soul. And even if a true disciple was hit by this attack, it would affect them, let alone a petty inner disciple. By controlling his mind and soul, he would naturally utter the truth without hiding anything. Of course, there were problems related to this method, because once used on someone, it would severely affect the mind and recovery might require a long time. Sometimes when the damage done to the mind was too severe, then there was no way to fully recover. But he didn't care about all that, so long he got to know the truth about Luo Tian's death. He looked at Yi Shiwen with a hint of uncertainty in his eyes, because he started to having doubts. Maybe this kid was saying the truth, and wasn't related to Luo Tian's death. After all, Luo Yifan was very confident on his martial arts tactic, and believed that no one could escape from its clutches. After a long time, Luo Yifan restrained his imposing aura locked on Yi Shiwen, and coldly looked at him then said, "You'd better not be related to Luo Tian's death, otherwise you will die a pathetic death." Luo Yifan openly threatened Yi Shiwen in front of everyone, as if he didn't care what other people think about this matter. Then took a step, and his figure shot into the sky, leaving a trail of rainbow light, then disappeared in the sky. The group of core disciples who came with him a while ago also followed after him, and disappeared in the sky. "Are you okay?" Shui Yuan asked with a hint of concern in her voice, though she wasn't familiar with Yi Shiwen, but they fought alongside in a life and death battle, so a sense of friendship had developed between them. "It's nothing, I am all right." A bleak smile appeared on his face while the intention to kill was boiling in his mind. Yes, this intention to kill was directed towards Luo Yifan, but Yi Shiwen had already accumulated a profound experience in using restraining breath technique. And even if the killing intention was boiling violently in his heart, he properly hid it inside, and nothing was revealed on the outside. If it was revealed, he would have no other choice but to die. An inner disciple daring to direct his intention to kill towards a true disciple was simply ridiculous. But Yi Shiwen didn't mind, because even true disciples were human beings. Sooner or later, he would also achieve the true realm. This Luo Yifan was an absolutely ruthless man, and as long as he found even a little evidence, he would rather kill than mistakenly let off a possible killer of Luo Tian. Moreover, Yi Shiwen figured out by now that Luo Yifan was just suspicious, and had no evidence. Since the majority of responsibility of Luo Tian's death fell on the shoulders of Hua Menghan, so Luo Yifan wouldn't continue to go into details. But this still didn't mean that this thing was over. The best way out of this mess was to kill Luo Yifan, and end this once and for all. In Yi Ziwen's heart, the intention to kill slowly began to spread. Chapter 128. Yifeng calls for help. Days passed, and in a blink of an eye, 2 months already passed from the incident of Prince Mo Yen. Yi Shiwen didn't join Zhuge Xingli and others, and went his own way. During these 2 months, Yi Shiwen was roaming throughout the Great Yu State, wiping out large numbers of the followers of Bai Majiao, because the followers of Bai Majiao had sprouted everywhere, and were attacking at various locations throughout the Great Yu State, leading to a sudden rise in requests of crushing these followers. After 100 years, misfortune again struck the Great Yu State. Not just Yiyuan School, other major sects also sent forces to crush the rebellion of Bai Majiao. The royal clan of Great Yu State also could not help but mobilize the royal guards, a terrifying army, though the foot soldiers were only warriors of peak Hotian 9th stage, but corporals were masters of Xiantian realm. And this army was called the terrifying slaughter machine of the royal clan of Great Yu State. In addition to the royal guards, Great Yu State's large military was also fully mobilized, and along with them county soldiers. Many local armies and military troops were stationed overnight, and were ordered to slaughter any Bai Majiao followers if found lurking in the nearby areas. Although the battle efficiency of Yi Shiwen was now comparable to the core disciples of Xiantian's 6th stage, but this time due to the unexpected resurfacing of Bai Majiao after 100 years, many formidable devils invaded from the Devi world during the rebellion, and Yi Shiwen repeatedly faced life and death situations during the missions while fighting them, and thanks to that his strength showed a vast progress. After training for 3 months, Yi Shiwen was simply like a reborn self of his previous self. His inner state fully consolidated at the peak of Xiantian 4th stage, and his strength increased all the way to the strength of 200 dragons, and his fighting efficiency was now between the Xiantian 6th stage and Xiantian 7th stage. During these 3 months, the power technique that Yi Shiwen comprehended the most was Tyrant Body Technique. He had already comprehended its 2nd layer to the Deshang realm, and now, he also comprehended the 3rd layer, and actually burnt 10,000 spirit stones in the mysterious space in the process, and results could be seen from the outline of his new sturdy and slim profile. In addition to that, Yi Shiwen also spent most of the time in understanding and practicing the coiling dragon palm inside the mysterious space. In the mysterious space, he was repeatedly practicing the profound thought of this technique over and over, although he didn't have the enough inner strength, but he could still comprehend the moves of coiling dragon palm, as it totally depended on his natural talent. Regarding this martial arts technique from ancient times, perhaps, even if many talented people tried to comprehend it, they would be unable to achieve anything. But Yi Shiwen had mysterious space, and so long as there were enough spirit stones, he would be able to unravel all the secrets of coiling dragon palm, as all of its secrets would be displayed in front of him, making it very easy for him to grasp this technique. Without this mysterious space, Yi Shiwen wouldn't have been able to comprehend even a bit of this ancient power technique, and instead there was a high possibility that he would have his soul and mind destroyed by the scary thought present inherently in this technique. During the time he was practicing coiling dragon palm, Yi Shiwen spent a total of 15,000 spirit stones, and finally mastered the 2nd move, Divine Dragon Flings Its Tail, to the point of having the first glimpse into its secrets. Unlike Hidden Dragon Rises from the Abyss, the 2nd move was more suited for its use in group warfare, where even one move could produce a massive explosion, as if a divine dragon flung its tail. And using this move, enemies within a large range could be attacked in one fell swoop. In a mountain village, corpses were lying everywhere throughout the village, and looking at these corpses, one could see that the vitality had been drained out of their bodies, leaving only mummified corpses on the roadside. A fight was going on in the central region of the village. A group of Bai Majiao followers were gathered around a cyan figure and trying to attack him. Shua, a long blade flashed and released a terrifying bladiki that instantly and severely chopped out towards the group of Bai Majiao followers. Bang! 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 Several Bai Majiao followers couldn't evade the attack and were split in half. Yi Zaiwen's figure was just like an immortal, fast and elegant, shuttling back and forth among these followers of Bai Majiao, and wherever his figure appeared, the followers of Bai Majiao would be directly chopped into 2 halves. Yi Shiwen didn't have a favorable impression of these Bai Majiao followers, and it was obvious, just from seeing how maliciously and unceasingly he was chopping them down into pieces. Poochie! 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 Wherever the blade light went, flesh and blood splattered everywhere. These devils finally learned the same fear that the dead villagers would have felt while getting massacred by them. But Yi Shiwen did not give them much time to reflect on it. A terrifying blade light released out of his long blade, and immediately chopped them into pieces. In a short interval of time, Yi Shiwen effortlessly beheaded each and every one of these Bai Majiao followers. Yi Shiwen relaxed and felt as if there was no end to these devils. They just kept on coming even after he continued to kill them endlessly. Resurfacing after a silent preparation for 100 years. No wonder they managed to accumulate so much strength of alarming proportions. Not to mention there were a large number of Bai Majiao followers beyond the boundaries of Great Yu State. Bai Majiao was a large influence, and its forces had managed to proliferate throughout the Zhenwu Jia, And if their overall influence was estimated, then it was much more powerful than Yuan School. Great Yu states by Ma Jiao was just one branch of the organization. Yi Xuan finished reciting, "Send souls to the afterlife," for the dead villagers, then called his red-crowned crane, and returned to Yuan School. During these days, he managed to complete many missions. The rewards for these by Ma Jiao-related missions were truly rich, and in just a few months, Yi Xuan actually gained more than 3,000 spirit stones by completing these missions. Although considering his current level, it was not too much, but it was not too less as well. Suddenly, a mysterious light flashed in the sky and flew directly into the summoning talisman held in his hands. This summoning talisman, into which the mysterious light just entered, was clearly a high-grade talisman, and far superior to an ordinary summoning talisman he previously had. Yi Xuan knew that this summoning talisman was very expensive, but he still bought one for 300 spirit stones, and discovered that its effects were very good, far better than the previous summoning talisman. It could send messages from far distances, and these messages were faster and extremely accurate. Yi Xuan sent Zheng Yuan into the summoning talisman, and a message suddenly appeared in front of him. "Little brother, the disciples of our Qianyu faction are stranded and currently trapped in Thousand Island City. Hurry up and come at once." Yi Xuan saw that the name inscribed on the message, it was Yi Feng. Immediately after receiving the distress message from the Qianyu faction, in his mind appeared the required information about Thousand Island City. After entering into the Xiantian realm, his body went through a metamorphosis. The brain was no exception, making him intelligent, and increased the retaining capacity of the brain, far more than ordinary people. Now he could read things and would never forget them. Thousand Island City was located on the southwest large waterfront of the Great Yu State. There were many estuaries in this place since it was located near the sea, and due to the inconsistency in the estuary formations and river flow, many small islands had formed, and Thousand Island City was located on top of these islands, which were also the origin of the city. It was very far from the Yuan School, and he needed to rush there as soon as possible. Yi Xuan didn't waste any time, and called his red-crowned crane, jumped on its back and quickly flew in the direction of Thousand Island City. There was a boundless blue sea on the eastern waterfront of the Great Yu State, and no one knew in the end how far it spread. There were many formidable sects present in the depths of the East China Sea, and not just that, there were also many powerful demon beasts that lurked in the depths of the sea, and there were also a lot of demon beasts with great wisdom, who had bounded the strength of the weak demon beasts to form a demon kingdom. On the mainland, mankind was dominant, and of course would not allow the existence of demon kingdom, but the depths of the East China Sea was the lair of demon beasts, and even the true realm experts wouldn't dare to go too deep into their lair. In short, the depths of East China Sea was a very dangerous place, and a forbidden place for humans, and no matter which sex someone belonged to, no one was allowed to go into the depths of East China Sea. However, contrary to what anyone would expect, in the range of 3,000 li radius from the coastline, there existed a large faction of human existence, and generally, the demon beasts didn't dare to get too close to their settlement. The red-crowned crane's speed was extremely fast, but there was a large distance to cover to reach the southwest side of the Great Yu State, and the time it would take to reach there was estimated as a full day's flight. Yi Xuan was anxious and impatient, because he remembered that he saw a mission which stated that Thousand Island City seemed to have been captured by many followers of Bai Ma Jiao, i.e., Yi Feng and others most likely had to face a large number of Bai Ma Jiao followers, and were in imminent danger. After flying for most of the time of the day, the sky was completely camouflaged by the curtain of night, and in the distance, a city could be seen partially visible in the looming fog. Since the Thousand Island City was located close to the sea, for more than half a year, it was generally obscured in dense fog. Originally, millions of people lived in Thousand Island City, but at this time, there was no trace of them. Rather, under the curtain of night, terrifying intermittent roars of demon beasts could be heard from all around. Yi Xuan jumped down from the back of his red-crowned crane, which was still flying in the air. He just landed on the island, and was immediately surrounded by numerous water frog beasts, who rushed over towards him while croaking. Water frog beast was a relatively low-level aquatic demon beast, but the biggest threat was their sheer numbers when they attacked. There were a lot of water frog beasts, and even if they weren't strong individually, but when several 100,000 beasts attacked at once, they could pose a serious threat for even the most formidable experts. Most experts would choose to flee in this situation, but Yi Shiwen did not want to waste this crucial time on these water frog beasts. His whole stature rushed forward, and a sudden burst of an incredibly cold and scary qi released out of his body. Boom! Those water frog beasts were suddenly shaken and turned into powder by the shock of terrifying qi. In no time, Yi Shiwen freed himself from the entanglement of these water frog beasts, although they were in large numbers, but fortunately, right now, not all of them had appeared, so dealing with the current number of water frog beasts wouldn't be much of a problem for him. Yi Shiwen released a large quantity of Zhen Yuan out of his body in all directions, which spread around him, and whenever the water frog beasts tried to approach him, they would immediately collapse and turn into powder. Yi Shiwen jumped to a rooftop and rushed towards the central part of Thousand Islands City, because he could sense that a huge Zhen method was operating crazily in the central part of the city. Yi Shiwen estimated that if the disciples of Qianyu faction were still alive, they were most probably inside that huge Zhen method. Immediately, without any hesitation, he rushed towards the central part of Thousand Islands City. However, the overall structure of this Thousand Islands City actually comprised of several small islands, and each of these small islands were separated by various waterways. Since Yi Shiwen couldn't fly, so he could only rush skimming on the roofs and surface of water. Chapter 129. Thousand Islands City sacrificed. Yi Shiwen soon arrived at the central part of Thousand Islands City, where he saw a huge Zhen method unceasingly operating. There he found a large concentration of mochi in the air, which was actually congealing this huge Zhen method. "Brother!" Yi Shiwen shouted and blew out Zhen Yuan, which sent shock waves in the air, which then immediately turned into sound waves and spread out. Although it was inferior to Luo Yifun's skill, but here, within a radius of 10 to 20 miles, anyone could clearly hear his shout. After transforming the Zhen Qi inside his body into Zhen Yuan, Yi Shiwen had become so formidable that even his shout turned into a great roar and proliferated through the atmosphere like a sonic wave weapon. Jie! A sharp burst of screams of night owls spread everywhere, followed by a flock of night owls dropping from the dark sky while screaming pitifully. They had been killed by the sonic waves released from Yi Ziwen's shout. "Little brother, we are here." Yifeng's voice finally reached him. This time, he didn't come to kill demon beasts or followers of Bai Majiao, but to find Yifeng and the others, and he must hurry up and find them as quickly as possible. Furthermore, looking at the strengths of Yifeng and the others, it could be said they weren't very formidable, but also couldn't be killed so easily. Yi Shiwen was just hoping that a true master had not assumed personal command of the Bai Majiao stronghold in Thousand Islands City. After hearing the voice of Yifeng, Yi Shiwen was suddenly overjoyed and shouted immediately, "Brother, wait a minute, I am coming." Yi Ziwen's stature shuttled in the direction from where Yifeng's voice originated, and was about to tear Zhen method with his bare hands. But suddenly, a large number of Huanma appeared to block his way along with Bai Majiao followers, and some great devils also mixed in with them. All of these Huanma were in the Xiantian realm. Bai Majiao followers were also at the Xiantian 4th stage, or Xiantian 5th stage. And not just that, even many of those great devils were adults, i.e., they were at Xiantian 6th stage. There were some great devil captains mixed in the crowd to command the other great devils, and strength of these captains was very high. Jia. It was really a good decision to trap the disciples of Yi Yuan School here. Now we can expect that the disciples of Yi Yuan School will keep on coming to save their comrades, and then we will kill them all. A great devil licked his lips with its scarlet tongue, and said with a cruel smile on his face. When Yi Shiwen heard this, he finally understood why Yifeng was able to send a distress message through his summoning talisman. So it was plan of these cunning devils all along to lure other disciples of Yi Yuan School and kill them. However, how could there be so many devil race and Bai Majiao followers at one place? It seemed like this should be a very important stronghold of Bai Majiao. At this time, countless thoughts flew into his mind. It was obvious that at present, he was standing in front of a huge trap, which was set to attract disciples of Yi Yuan school. However, even so, there was no other way to save Yi Feng and the others. He had no other choice but to fall into the trap himself and look for Yi Feng and the others, and then formulate a plan to get out of this trap. "You devil bastards!" Yi Shiwen shouted, then took a step, and his figure turned into a streamer and vanished. And the very next instant, his figure appeared high in the sky, right above the Zhen method. While he was in the air, he chopped out his long blade and instantly released a 10 meters long daomang that immediately rushed towards Zhen method. Bang! 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 The Huanma devils who tried to block this huge and terrifying daoguang were instantly chopped into pieces. Boom! A 10 meters long terrifying daoguang smashed into the huge Zhen method. The Zhen method shook violently but didn't collapse. From the deepest part of the Zhen method came a burst of strange laughter. Apparently Yi Zaiwen's blade attack alarmed a formidable devil who was currently far away. In the deepest parts of the Zhen method stood a huge specter, so huge that even the houses at his side appeared somewhat tiny in comparison. His eyes were like a pair of huge lanterns in general, and right now, he seemed to be keeping a close eye on a huge spiraling vortex, which was right in front of him. From this vortex, waves of cold and sinister machi was unceasingly coming out, and every once in a while, a Huanma or a great devil would come out as well. Honorable Devil Commander, a Xiantian 6th stage disciple of Yi Yuan school has arrived. At this time, a great devil walked next to the huge specter and informed him about Yi Zaiwen's arrival. "Just one. Well, better than nothing," the huge specter said, and his voice came out like the sound of a mighty bell in general. "Our aim should be to kill as many of these humans as we can. The more humans die, the better for our plans. And our plan has just begun. But make sure that those kids trapped in Zhen method do not die. We will continue to use them to attract more and more experts." The huge specter laughed and said. A lot of Huanma and great devils had surrounded Yi Shiwen, as well as those followers of Bai Majiao, and their dense and gloomy aura completely enveloped him. Yi Shiwen shouted loudly, then shot his palm, and immediately, a coiling dragon roared violently and soared high in the sky. This coiling dragon was made up of Zhen Yuan, and a part of its long body was coiled around Yi Shiwen to protect him. This coiling dragon held the power of authentic dragon qi, which instantly went berserk, and some of the weak Huanma and mini night owls were instantly annihilated by the dragon qi. Machi was the darkest form of yin energy in the world, whereas dragon qi was its nemesis, because dragons were said to be the rulers of heaven and earth, and were noble beings that possessed mighty yang energy in the form of dragon qi. The small and weak devils were swept by dragon qi and immediately decimated. When the formidable great devils bumped into dragon qi, their bodies suddenly caught fire and started to burn violently, causing unbearable burning pain. Yi Shiwen was protecting himself by surrounding his body with the dragon qi of the coiling dragon, because right now, this coiling dragon was just like a big disaster in the eyes of those devils. In the past, if Yi Shiwen had resorted to hidden dragon rises from the abyss, then using it once would have consumed 10% of his Xiantian Jin Qi. But now that the Xiantian Jin Qi energy within his body had been transformed into Xiantian Jin Yuan, the consumption rate was almost negligible. And now that the Zhen Yuan consumption rate was negligible, he could finally use hidden dragon rises from the abyss for longer periods of time. Earlier, this move was his secret one-shot kill method, but now he could use it as much as he wanted to, which could be considered his largest harvest during his last session of training. However, the Zhen Yuan consumption rate for Divine Dragon flings its tail was still large, and using it even once consumed half of the Zhen Yuan from his body, and couldn't be used frequently. Just like earlier when he couldn't use hidden dragon rises from the abyss, due to high Jin Qi consumption rate. Using the dragon Qi armor, Yi Shiwen managed to safeguard himself in the sea of devils. The devils couldn't get close to Yi Shiwen, because the dragon Qi that was surrounding him. Some of the devils tried to approach him, and caught fire, and started screaming incessantly. Yi Shiwen immediately brandished his long blade, and displayed his profound blade skills, by beheading all of the devils, who had been injured by Dragon Qi. They simply couldn't escape his blade, and were split in half. The coiling dragon, which was coiled around Yi Ziwen's body at this moment, seemed to be made up of pure lingqi, and whenever it used its claws to grab devils, their bodies would instantly explode. Earlier, Yi Shiwen wasn't aware of this, that Dragon Qi was actually the nemesis of devils. He just noticed that when devils at Xiantian 5th stage, and less came close to him, their bodies instantly caught fire, and they started to scream, giving an easy opportunity to Yi Shiwen to behead them. Xiantian 6th and 7th stage devils were not a match of Yi Shiwen, who was relying on Dragon Qi to protect his body. Whenever formidable devils and great devils tried to approach him, they were first injured by the Dragon Qi, then chopped down by Yi Ziwen's long blade. Even great devil captains who were at the Xiantian 8th stage couldn't get close to his body. But Yi Shiwen also knew that he wouldn't be able to endure like this for too long. The consumption rate of Zhen Yuan was just too great in order to kill these devils, and even if the Zhen Yuan within his body was extremely vigorous and profound, far more vigorous than an ordinary master of Xiantian 6th stage, but he was still unable to withstand such a high consumption rate. There were just too many of these devils. Perhaps handling these numbers was not a big deal for a true master, but for Yi Shiwen, this was too much. He didn't know where these devils were coming out from, because they just kept on coming. There was simply no end to them, which was quite astonishing. Yi Shiwen secretly guessed in his heart that this was probably not just a stronghold of Bai Majiao, and was something else entirely. Perhaps they opened up a portal to the devil world, and were continuously sending devils from the other side. Otherwise, how could there be an endless number of devils? Generally speaking, if so many devils were being sent from the devil world, then it must have been discovered by now. Yi Shiwen became more anxious as he understood that he couldn't delay anymore and waste his energy on these endless numbers of devils. He shot his palm, and immediately, a dragon roared and flew out of his palm. Then its two formidable claws pierced into the Zhen method and tore a hole in it. Whoosh! Seeing the gap in the Zhen method, Yi Shiwen dived in like a drill and wormed his way inside the Zhen method. When the devils saw him forcing his way into the Zhen method, they also rushed after him to squeeze, and only to give up in the end, when the Zhen method replenished itself and was completed once again. Yi Shiwen searched inside the Zhen method for a moment, and finally found the members of Qianyu faction. And at this time, they were surrounded by many devils whose attacks were being constantly repelled by the magical sound flute of Zhangsun Yuan. Yi Shiwen took a look and saw Yi Feng, Yi Ruxue, Zhang Yang, Zhangsun Yuan, Yan Qiliang, and other familiar people. Almost all of his friends were here, but he noticed that all of them were the masters of Xiantian realm. Could it be that this was some sort of group activity of the top members, who were also collectively considered the backbone of Qianyu faction? If these people were annihilated, then Qianyu faction could basically be considered as finished. Brother, why have you come here? Yi Shiwen approached and asked. It's entirely my fault. I did not consider the safety of everyone, and thought this would be a small matter. Yi Feng sighed and said, How can this be just your fault? All of us made the plan together to come here, but we never thought that these insidious devils could be so cunning. Yan Qiliang immediately said in a loud voice. Then Yi Shiwen heard the whole matter from Yi Ruxue, and finally came to know about the sequence of events. Several days ago, a disciple of Qianyu faction heard the news that his hometown, Thousand Island City, suffered an invasion from Bai Majiao, so he decided to go back and inspect. Later, Yan Qiliang came to know about this matter from him, and wanted everyone to participate in this plan, and turned this into the first group activity of Qianyu faction since its establishment. But taking into account the current turmoil and danger outside, he decided to bring only Xiantian level masters with him. According to the information they had received, it just looked like a simple matter of attack by the followers of Bai Majiao. So they did not mind, but they didn't know about the actual danger until they arrived here, and discovered that Thousand Island City was empty, and everyone in the entire city had been massacred. Over 1 million people had been turned into blood sacrifices by the devils. And while they were trying to escape, they got trapped in this Jin method. What did you say? Everyone in the city has been sacrificed. Yi Shiwen held his breath and asked in surprised tone. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.